The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 33. The Labyrinth. I wish someone would come and take this magic away. Right now. The moment those words left my mouth, I knew that uttering them was among the most rash and foolish things I had ever done. One should never make wishes idly, as it is impossible to know who may be listening. Perhaps I had been fortunate, and no one had heard my words. But my pack felt lighter, and when I opened it, I saw to my dismay that my Book of Shadows was gone. My hurried attempts to use Eldritch Sight and to cast a simple cantrip met with failure. It was as though I had tried to use magic before meeting my patron. I had not specified that I wished to be rid of my troublesome surges of wild magic. I simply wished to be rid of this magic, throwing the details on the mercy of whomever happened to hear. To my great misfortune, whomever happened to hear was the Goblin King, Jareth, who hid my magic away in the heart of his labyrinth with a promise. If I reached the center of the labyrinth in 13 hours, my magic would return to me. If not, I would be his creature forever.
Welcome to Wonderful World of Darklords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft domains of dread, and we've done it all for you.
Along the way, we'll look at the Dark Lord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate the setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, Labyrinth.
Yes.
Yeah, here we are, gosh. So, first things first, in case you are new to our program, and go ahead and have your finger raised to say that it is not anything like a Disney movie. No. This is our April episode. Hello, happy April. And of course, we did our April 1st, April Fool's funny joke episode with Phineas and Ferb, which was much easier to Ravenloft than this. But then in the spirit of April Fools, in the spirit of misrule, in the spirit of order being overturned, we used this opportunity of the month of April, April 13th, to do a non-Disney movie. So season 1 was Last Unicorn, season 2 was Princess Mononoke, and season 3, here we are with Labyrinth.
Woohoo!
I think it's a pretty solid lineup right there.
Yeah, really. So, cards on the table, it was originally not going to be Labyrinth, because we were all ready to do Coraline.
Which is a great movie.
It's a great movie, and we had stuff all planned out, and we knew exactly what we wanted to do.
Yeah, we had really good ideas.
Yeah, it would have been a really cool domain. But then...
some things happened.
Some jerk who wrote the book went and ruined it for everyone. Mm-hmm. So...
And we decided this was not the time to explore those ideas we were very proud of.
Yeah. So we had a wide open space in April, and Tom said, "What should we do?" And I said, "You still owe me for Tron."
Yes, I do. I sure do. I owe you for a couple of things.
But mainly for Tron. So now we are doing our non-problematic fave Jim Henson. And
I owe you for Tron, and so now we're doing your favorite of the 80s high-budget, unsuccessful sci-fi fantasy cult classics. So, this is Rachel's Tron. This is one of her favorite movies, and we know that we said is a cult classic, and there are many, many people out there that feel the same way. This is one of their favorite movies.
Yes, this is one of their favorite movies, yeah.
So, once again, cards on the table. This is a challenge. It is a movie we both deeply love, unlike Tron, and a movie that is going to be very challenging to do justice to. And this was a much longer than usual, outlining and planning and scripting process.
Mm-hmm.
And this,
we want to do it right.
And this is a movie that is so good and so perfect. And part of it is a perfectly told story in the medium.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Labyrinth, everybody watches Labyrinth and says that's a fun movie.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people watch Labyrinth and say that's a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's some people, and if you clicked on a podcast about Labyrinth, there's a chance you're one of them, that watch Labyrinth and realize it is a great movie.
Yes.
And maybe you realize that consciously, and maybe you don't. You're just like, this is a fun movie, but you just keep coming back to it. Like, you just keep, buying hoggles.
Lives in your brain.
You have a plush Ludo and a Funko Pop hoggle, and you bought the coloring book, and you bought the comics, and you bought the everything, and they keep making comics of Labyrinth. They keep making, stuff of Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because, whether people realize it or not, it is a great movie.
Yes.
And we really want to do justice to a perfectly told story and a perfect medium for that story. So this is a very different medium. The
Yes.
Going from a movie
is
to a D&D setting. So this is not going to be as good as Labyrinth.
No.
You know, in the theme of our lineup of our April episode, I think everyone has had a disclaimer saying this is not going to be as good as
as Up, Phineas and Ferb, or Labyrinth.
Huh.
We did 3 perfect things in a row, guys. We're sorry.
Yeah. I mean, or even the other April ones. You know, Last Unicorn,
yeah.
Princess Mononoke, and now Labyrinth. And every single one of those had a disclaimer where we have to be like, this is really hard. Really want to do justice to this. It's not going to be as good. And we'll start those thoughts with our sort of genesis of Rachel and many people's being interested in this project, our Dark Lord for our domain of the Goblin King's Labyrinth. Spoiler alert for the Dark Lord. In a section we like to call...
Yum. I'm sorry, in a section we like to call The Lord. The Lord. As I stood at the edge of Paradise Falls, attempting to regain my bearings, a tremor shook the earth beneath my feet. I stepped back, alarmed, but the ground crumbled away and I was falling. But slowly, gently, as though I had cast featherfall on myself, and the spectacular vista around me vanished into blackness. I landed on my hands and knees on hard, dry ground. Certainly not the lush jungle at the foot of Paradise Falls. As I tried to catch my breath, a black-gloved hand appeared in my field of vision. I took it, unthinking, and a tall and elegant figure pulled me to my feet. When I met his eerily mismatched eyes, I knew I was in the presence of Jareth, the Goblin King. I would later learn more about Jareth, that he was less than thrilled at having inherited his throne and chafed at the inane and tedious company of his subjects, that he believed he could bring any opponent to their knees with a stern glance and became as ill-tempered as a child in the face of resistance. That beneath his petulance was an air of desperation, a terror of being bested that went far beyond the desire to maintain face. The goblins would fawn at Jareth's feet no matter how he fared in any given conflict. He surely had no fear of losing their approval. Somehow, although he had not met me until that moment, Jareth craved my submission, specifically, and for its own sake. But at that moment, all I knew was that I was in the presence of the legendary Goblin King, a figure whom I had always assumed to be a mere bedtime story. I took in the scene around me, a desolate landscape of barren trees beneath a twilight sky, and in the distance, a sprawling labyrinth, and said an extraordinarily self-evident thing. This isn't Paradise Falls, is it? The Goblin King folded his arms, a smirk playing about his thin lips.
No. You know who I am. That means you know where you are, and you know why you're here. You asked for my help, and I gave it.
He flourished a crystal ball in one hand, and inside I could see a swirl of magical energy, one with the precise color and luminosity of my eldritch blast. I was so outraged that I could not speak, and Jareth needed no invitation to fill the silence. With a gesture, a door appeared, and through it I could see the trees and cottages of Salem.
Go home, Danielle. Forget all this. You no longer bear the burden of putting your life at risk to further the goals of a tyrant.
How terribly kind of you. I don't suppose you'll give it back if I ask nicely, will you? That little smirk played around his lips again, and he held out the crystal. I knew he would not give it to me, yet I could not help but reach for it. Just before my fingertips could brush it, it popped like a soap bubble.
What's said is said. You wished your magic away. I took it. What's that if not kindness? You want it back, it's there.
He pointed to the labyrinth and the castle at its center.
But beware. Do you really think you're any kind of match for me? You'll be alone in this, Danielle. Aslan can't help you here.
That cruel knife twist of his mouth again, as a clock appeared beside him.
There's only one king in the labyrinth.
So, as the name, the Goblin King's Labyrinth, that I have on the DM's Guild right, the non-copyrightable name.
Can't copyright Goblin King or Labyrinth.
They're all in the dictionary. Every single one of those words is in the dictionary. Our Dark Lord for this Goblin King's Labyrinth domain is our Goblin King, Jareth, or possibly Jared, or Gareth, as I might call him in the write-up. And he's a perfect character, perfectly executed in the medium of the movie and the story he's telling. but he is potentially a very good Dark Lord.
Yes.
He does not have the obvious perfect Dark Lordness of, like, a Scar.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of areas where to make him fit as a Dark Lord, we had to stretch and work and come up with a bunch of whole stuff. But at heart, he is a Byronic garbage fire person.
He is a Byronic garbage fire person.
Strong Byronic garbage fire energy.
Yeah. Tom got me a Labyrinth visual companion for Christmas a couple of years ago, and they were going into a bunch of interviews and behind-the-scenes stuff, and they specifically cite Heathcliff, the king of Byronic garbage fires.
So, at heart, what is a Dark Lord but a Byronic garbage fire starring in their own sitcom? So, if we have a Byronic garbage fire, we can probably get a good Dark Lord out of him.
Yes, indeed. And the challenge here, because again, it's a lot, honestly, like the troubles we had with Maleficent, and that's not going to be the last time you hear that comparison, because part of what makes Jareth so appealing is there is that level of mystique. We don't know how he got to the Labyrinth. We don't know how he is, who he is. We did read the Coronation comic, which is like some Jareth backstory stuff, and we liked that, and we are bringing in elements of that. But it still doesn't necessarily fit all of our Dark Lord needs. And also there's, with Jareth, it exists so perfectly, Labyrinth does, as being, is it real or is it all in Sarah's head? It's both. It's all in Sarah's head, but that doesn't mean it's not real.
Right.
And we have to, in order to make Jareth a fully fledged character and give him an independent psychology, but also kind of being part of Sarah's imagination, we have to pop that soap bubble a little bit. It will float down in your hand and pop as the clock strikes 13. And that's just what we gotta do.
Like, a Dark Lord can't be potentially just a projection of another person. A Dark Lord has to have their own backstory and their own psychology.
Yeah.
But if you clicked on this, you know who Jareth is. I'll dollars to donuts. But maybe you are just a 35 plus nerd and you just want to hear people talk about how great Labyrinth is, which I hope you're enjoying so far.
Gosh,
We've been trying to be there for you. But you don't know what a Dark Lord is and why we need to make Jareth a independent person to make him a good Dark Lord. Rachel, what is a Dark Lord?
Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness that causes the dark powers to say, why, hello, new friend, we want to play with you forever. And so they pluck that evil being up, and they place them in a domain, which is a hell that is tailor-made just for them. There are some really great Dark Lords. There are some not-so-great Dark Lords, some of whom are even Dark Lords of Labyrinths.
Ooh.
So we are going to get into the 4 qualities that separate the Strahd von Zaroviches from the Medusa wandering around in a labyrinth who did nothing wrong from 2nd edition. And we're going to go through and describe how those 4 qualities apply to Strahd von Zarovich, the Dark Lord. So the first of those 4 qualities is that act of ultimate darkness. They do a specific evil thing that draws the dark power's attention, and you can see exactly where our problem with Jareth is starting right here. And in Strahd's case, it was killing his brother because he wanted to get with his brother's fiancée. Our second element is what they call in Van Derten's Guide to Ravenloft the Torment. Because we're a Disney podcast, we call it they got what they wanted, they lost what they had. In Strahd's case, it's congratulations, your brother's out of the picture, you have eternal youth, so you're not too old for Titjana, but you're too Strahd for Titjana, and you always will be. Our third element is an element of tragedy or relatability. They're not just evil for the sake of being evil. There's something about them that makes us wince in sympathy, and in Strahd's case, it's that unrequited love is just the worst. And then the fourth element is that the domain reflects the Dark Lord and their curse in some way. Strahd is the Dark Lord of spooky gothic vampire land. He's not the Dark Lord of a labyrinth. And Barovia is a boring mud slump to kind of reflect that loneliness. He isn't with Titjana, and he couldn't find another Titjana even if he wanted to, because Barovia is full of very, very boring people who would bore him to tears.
So, right away, challenge number 1. That, as we said, part of the genius of Jareth is it's the perfect soap bubble, the perfect, uncertainty cat in a box of... Is
Schrodinger's Goblin King.
Schrodinger's Goblin King. Is this an autonomous, independent person, or is this just a projection of Sarah's psyche? And we have to come down on autonomous, independent person.
Yeah.
That's the way this system works.
Like, unless Sarah were the Dark
Yes.
Lord, like, projecting Jareth as kind of her shadow self.
Which is interesting, but a little high concept.
Yeah, not what we're doing.
So, in order to present him as a Dark Lord, we need to, as Rachel mentioned, give him a backstory. And we're both kind of very reluctant to do that, because, as Rachel mentioned, Maleficent, part of what makes Maleficent amazing, is the lack of backstory, is the mysteriousness. So we really don't want to hurt Jareth's mystique. We don't want to add a ton of backstory, but we kind of have to.
Yeah.
We're something unusual with this first criteria, the act of ultimate darkness. This is usually where we do the backstory. Mm-hmm. But this is such a, like, tiptoeing through the minefield. And, like,
yes.
What we decide to do for Jareth's backstory and his act of ultimate darkness that brings him into Ravenloft and the Labyrinth into Ravenloft is going to influence every other aspect of this.
Yes.
And even the very metaphysical idea are going to be all about this. So normally we just kind of jump into the character's backstory that we came up with here, but we are actually going to sort of talk through our thought process.
And we're also doing that because, again, Jareth, he is striking such a balance. He's such a Rorschach blot. That we're looking at this Rorschach blot, we're saying, okay, what shape are we seeing? And we don't want to come in and say, it's a giraffe. And then describe, the giraffe to you when you're looking at it going, what the heck are you talking about? This isn't a giraffe, it's a rabbit. So we're going to kind of talk through the process of how we arrived at Jareth is a giraffe, which is not a sentence I expected to say when we started this recording session, but okay.
So we have to start with the Labyrinth because they're so interrelated. Like, we kind of can't do, here's all our stuff with Jareth, here's all stuff with the Labyrinth. Like, they are intertwined in a really profound way.
Yeah.
So to sort of talk about our backstory for Jareth, we need to talk about our idea of what the Labyrinth is. And before we get into that, we want to talk through how we arrived at that idea from the material we have. We want to show our work in this one.
So we started with the Labyrinth as Sarah's mindscape. She's giving it definition and shape. She's the one who, her stuffed animals are running around in the Labyrinth. Hoggle is her bookend. We even have, we're going to get into this more later, because it comes out in the novelization, which is available now. It's back in print as an ebook at the very least. I'm not sure if it's available physically. Check it out. It's great. But if you look, when it's panning over her room, she has a black and white photo on her mirror of a woman who looks a lot like her with David Bowie. And it's that, the shape and definition that has been given to Jareth is her mom's boyfriend. And that's what comes out in the novelization, is that, Jareth looks like her mom's boyfriend who Sarah has naughty feelings for. And you can't escape that aspect of the Labyrinth. It's such an important part of why it works as a movie, is that we're kind of going through Sarah's inner journey. But to be a usable NPC, again, he can't just be a figment of her imagination. So it can't be that this is uniquely Sarah's thing. Sarah's just, having a weird fever dream about her mom's boyfriend.
Right.
This has to be a thing that Jareth as a person does.
Yes.
That he seeks people out who make wishes, and then that person gives the Labyrinth and even him some kind of definition.
We're taking a bit here from a role-playing game we've mentioned before, Changeling the Lost. And our beloved Changeling the Lost.
Yes.
And Changeling the Lost, the PCs are all changelings. They're people that were taken by True Fae and turned into changelings and escaped Arcadia back to Earth, and it's so good!
It's so good, guys. It is my second favorite role-playing game. Ravenloft, then Changeling the Lost. I love it. Also,
it would be so much easier to Labyrinth Changeling
the
Lost.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Than it would be to, because it's one of the big influences on Changeling the Lost.
Yeah.
And in one of the last supplements they released for it, they even get into why do they do this. Because they're like, I don't know, they're Fae, it's what they do. But they're like, no, they give them a reason. And that reason is that true Fae are kind of a void. And they need mortals to define themselves. To say, this is who I'm not. And also they need conflict. That they kind of are deliberately, the reason they're so awful to changelings is that it's the conflict with the mortals they're turning into changelings actually gives them definition.
Yeah. The example that they give is that if the true Fae is just in its home area, it could say, oh, I want to, jump over a chasm full of fire. But since the Fae is the Fae and is also its home, it's like the Fae is the person jumping and the chasm and the fire. And so there is no challenge there. It's just kind of a daydream.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to change it from a daydream to reality, they need to have an actual outside force to throw themselves against.
To quote Coraline by Keith David. Who we mentioned bringing that really, because we were all in a headspace. Mm-hmm. So that did that. We had those glasses on when we were looking at this as a domain. There's a bit where Keith David says, talking about why the other mother take Coraline, and she wants something to love, something that isn't her, or maybe she just wants something to eat.
Yeah, that's such a true failure.
Yes. Or even just that idea that everything in the other mother world is in the other mother.
Yeah.
Except Coraline. Mm-hmm. And she needs that to define herself against.
Yeah. If it weren't for Sarah, the whole labyrinth would just be Jareth.
Mm-hmm.
Everything would be Jareth. And Sarah gives him something that isn't him.
And if you're looking for any kind of textual evidence for this, well, like you do when you come up with a fan theory, and we open it. And I love this. It's so weird. It's so it sticks in your head. They're just in a black space. Mm-hmm. They're not in a room. There's no stonework. There's no window. There's no background. They're just sort of in a void and they're asleep. Mm-hmm. And then Sarah starts to tell the story and they wake up.
Yeah.
And this idea that almost without someone, a mortal, who is bringing that definition, that shape, that form in the labyrinth, it's dormant. Mm-hmm. It's just sort of like the goblins are just kind of asleep in a void, waiting for a mortal to wake them up.
Yeah. So that is point the first in our Jareth.
Yes, good lord, it's going to be long.
Point the second in our Jareth giraffe. In that visual guide that I mentioned before, which get used to us citing that,
right.
There was a thing that was a big part of the planning process for Jim Henson's team, which is that Jareth himself is the labyrinth. Mm-hmm. This also came out of some of the Coronation comic, and the center of the labyrinth is his heart. That when you get to the center of the labyrinth, you're getting to Jareth, you're getting to his heart, and we really like that idea of the all of these walls and defenses that he's building, all of this maze is to keep people from reaching his heart. But we didn't want to get too literal with it. We didn't want to repeat Davy Jones.
I kept pitching Jareth took his heart out and it became the labyrinth. Rachel was yeah, okay.
We already did that.
Or we could do something else. Or a different idea.
Or we could do something else. But that was another thing that we wanted to get to, is the idea that the center is Jareth's heart. He wants to protect it at all costs. And even when you reach the center, or when Sarah gets to within you, it's crumbling, it's chaotic, there even is, you get that lack of definition because there's not even an up and down.
Yeah.
So you get that sense that this is his inner self that he's trying to keep her from.
And then finally, we have a third point in our sort of logical syllogism trying to reach our backstory, and that is that Jareth is a spoiled brat.
Yes, he is.
And it's sometimes easy to overlook because David Bowie's amazing, and because he's such a, stormy, authoritative, majestic figure, especially in the beginning and the first scene with them, and in, World Falls Down and all. But a bunch of the other scenes, he is just a brat.
So petulant.
He's just a petulant little jerk. Mm-hmm. And that's a thing that, that a bunch of the making of stuff has this quote from David Bowie saying that sort of he's a temperamental rock star.
Yeah.
And that he kind of, has all the good qualities of a moody, temperamental rock star, of being very romantic, very grand gesture, very incredibly charismatic. Such a romantic. Yeah. But also all the bad qualities of being a petulant brat.
Yeah. Sarah says his labyrinth is too easy, and he throws a temper tantrum and advances the clock.
Also, the material in that David Bowie thing, and in a couple of other points, I can't recall at the moment, they talk about him inheriting the labyrinth. David Bowie has some line that's he seems to have sort of reluctantly inherited it. And every single, expanding the material, comics we looked at, anything giving any kind of backstory.
Novels.
A lot of them have this idea that, no, the labyrinth was there before Jareth.
Yeah.
And he sort of inherited or became the Goblin King, but it did come before him.
Yeah, he didn't invent the labyrinth. Even though he is the labyrinth, he didn't invent the labyrinth. All right.
Right.
So, we have described how the Rorschach Blot
is
a giraffe.
We have shown our work.
Now we're going to talk about why this giraffe is a Dark Lord.
Yes.
Sorry, this is going to be so long.
This is going to be a really long episode.
You can see the timestamp. You know how long this thing is.
Or maybe you can't, and it's you see it says part 1. We're like, we're just starting out. We're setting out on this journey, and we're already like, there's a good chance this will be a 2-parter.
But is it going to be 13 hours?
I bet we could do 13 hours. So, in our backstory, Jareth was a prince. He didn't want the responsibilities of being a prince. He didn't want the burdens of kingship. He felt very hemmed in by that. He had some friend or companion, someone, maybe like someone raising him, like a maid, maybe like a friend,
or
maybe
a mother.
Like a mother, right?
Maybe someone who it's like his sweetheart, and especially like a sweetheart who he couldn't be with because she was lowborn or whatever.
But for this companion, he loved them in whatever form of love. They loved him. And the companion told him stories about the wild, carefree goblins. And he bemoaned his responsibilities and limitations and rules and wanted to be like the goblins. And she said she wished the goblins would take him and make him their king and he could be anything. And that happened. This was a key. We kept coming up with backstories of Jareth as a Sarah, of Jareth as someone who went into the Labyrinth to go after someone and then ended up as the Goblin King. Mm-hmm. And they were never quite clicking.
Yeah. And then with stories where we had him as a Toby, it was kind of but if he's a Toby, then somebody else did the thing wishing him away.
Right.
So that doesn't work. But...
So we are imagining he was the Toby, he was taken by the goblins, but they did say he could be their king and rule them and not have anyone ever tell him what to do and have freedom.
And because goblins are magic, he could be anything he wanted.
And so his Sarah went into the challenge of the Labyrinth, got to the Goblin City, but he wanted to stay. Mm-hmm. And he knew that by doing this, he was trapping her in the Labyrinth.
Yeah, she reached the center. She said, "I come to take you home," and he said, "No."
Mm-hmm. Her soul became the foundation of his Labyrinth, and it became the foundation that sort of his Labyrinth is built on. And he chose to have this person be trapped there forever, in some form, for his freedom, and that was his act of ultimate darkness.
Yeah. All of that for the act of ultimate darkness.
So, let's see if we can move through these others a little quicker.
I would hope so.
So our second point is our torment. He got what he wanted, he lost what he had. And this is, I think this is one of those things where, like, you watch it when you're a kid, and you're like, oh boy, dancing Muppets, this is fun. What a fun story. Dance, magic, dance, and the great goblins. But then you watch it as an adult, and you get what a, like, sad person Jareth is. Like,
and he's so bored.
Yes, you just, the boredom, and even then the ending, it's not just like, oh, now she's confronting him, and she's going to beat the Goblin King. Like, this is this interaction feels so fraught with, like, sorrow.
Yes.
And loneliness.
Like, he knows he's going to lose her, and he's desperate to not lose her, but he knows it's going to happen. So,
our tormenting got what he wanted. He has total freedom. Mm-hmm. Like, nothing. He has no limitations. He has no rules. But that's being undefined.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He has no self. Because without limitations, without some kind of definition, you're just an amorphous blob.
Yeah. He can be anything. That means he's everything.
Mm-hmm.
His identity is so fluid that even his identity doesn't limit him. Like, he can be anything that he wants, but that means that, again, there's no core that he's building himself around other than whatever the Sarah defines him as, and also his spoiled petulance.
That a key thing was that confrontation at the ending within you, and the line, "I'm exhausted from living up to your expectation." That whole scene of, you were frightened, I was terrifying. Like, this idea that so much of what we've seen about Jareth isn't coming from him, it's coming from Sarah. That she's got this idea of the Goblin King, and he's just being that idea.
Yeah, and what if he's not just victim blaming her there? What if he actually means it?
Yeah. And so that is part of this tragedy, that he has freedom, but that freedom is a total lack of definition. Mm-hmm. And that whole idea of freedom, his desire for freedom, also extends to relationships. That he is bored. And this is a core paradox of his whole search for Sarahs, that having a Sarah gives him something to do, gives him something interesting, because this person isn't a subject. Mm-hmm. Because this person isn't a goblin.
She's not him.
She's not him. She's pushing back against him, and it's in that pushing back he has something interesting. And he wants to make her one. Like, he wants to beat her and make her a goblin and have sort of control over her, and then she won't be interesting anymore.
Yeah, because then he wins, then he has control, then no one's telling him what to do, and then no one's telling him what to do, so he has nothing to do, and he doesn't have the interesting person anymore. She's just a goblin or trapped in a bubble dancing or whatever.
That, like, to bring the other mother from Coraline, the whole, she gets a kid, and she gets them to get the buttons and to be part of her world, but then they're sort of drained of the sustenance that she's getting from them. Like, it's the them not being button people that is the most enriching for her. And, like, to put it, there's a lot going on, but I think to put it in the simplest way possible, he wants love, but he also wants control.
Yeah.
And that is that fundamental paradox that he has potential for love, but he will always, always, always fail. He will either, the person will defeat him, or the person will be turned into a goblin, and he will lose that potential for love because he cannot let go of that desire for control.
Yeah. That he can't say, yay, we both win. Never mind.
So, our third element of a good Dark Lord, element of tragedy and relatability.
It's why we picked the Ravenloft domain over Domain of Delight, because, Labyrinth, it has a lot of Domain of Delight elements to it. It is very Feywild. I'm sure it was one of the big inspirations they had for the Feywild. But ultimately, there's the core tragedy of Jareth, that he is such a sad, lonely man. When we were coming up with what we wanted to do with Jareth, like figuring out what we wanted our backstory to be, we were thinking about this whole idea that he is kind of amorphous because he wants to be all the things, and this, spoiled child thing. And I kept coming back to Peter Pan.
Yeah.
That this is really kind of like an adult version of Peter Pan. That he's been the kid who needs to grow up and doesn't want to, and now that's curdled into an adult. And kind of the allure and horror of Peter Pan as an adult, that you have that charming, carefree, like rakish Peter Pan goodness. But no, boys are supposed to grow up. All boys except one grow up. And even the ending was really making me think of Peter Pan.
The very ending of the movie was a big moment of Peter Pan resonance with us.
That we mentioned in our Peter Pan episode, that in the book, there's the bit where the Darling family is reuniting and everyone is happy and laughing, and Peter is just watching from outside the window and he can never be a part of it. Which is
the ending of Labyrinth.
Clear parallels to the ending of Labyrinth, yeah. And just like everyone, even the goblins, they're there with Sarah, they're laughing, they're partying, they're hugging each other, and Jareth won't go inside because he refuses to be with her on her terms. It has to be on his terms. He has to win. And therefore, he'll never be able to be in there with her.
And you have to dig a little under the surface because he is such a figure of grandeur and such a figure of romance and such a figure of just a sweeping Byronic trash fire.
Yeah.
But there's such a core tragedy and relatability in that final image of him sitting outside, watching them through the window and then flying away. Like, then you completely get that this is a self-imposed loneliness. And he could be a part of this. And that just core dilemma of you want to be on the inside, you want to be with the other people on your terms, but not on their terms.
Yes.
That's so tragic and so relatable. And that gives us tragedy and relatability.
Yes, indeed.
And then finally we have that long hike to get through this part. Domain reflecting the Dark Lord's personality and curse. This is one of the easiest we've ever done.
Yes.
Because we mentioned the whole point of the Labyrinth is it is sort of his inner world.
Yeah, Jareth is the Labyrinth.
Jareth is the Labyrinth. And even just that it's mercurial, it's untrustworthy, it's cheating. The Labyrinth isn't a physical space. The Labyrinth is this sort of dream reality. And it's a dream reality defined by the Sarah. Like the shape and the form and the specific images, everything's taken, are defined by the Sarah. But the nature of the Labyrinth is Jareth. And even just that, it's him keeping you at arm's length. Anyone that he might love him, keeping them at arm's length. And it is so much dealing with him. Like, navigating the Labyrinth is dealing with him. Going through the Labyrinth is being in a relationship with Jareth. And it's super fun. And we have this whole, wonderful sort of Ouroboros double helix here of, the Sarah defines the Labyrinth, but the Sarah's idea of the Goblin King is coming from these, like, external sources. Like, Sarah's not just completely making up the Goblin King. She's, like, taking from fairy tales. She's taking from fantasy stories. She's taking from the play The Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
And so the wonderful thing is, your PCs and you have a particular idea of the Goblin King from the 1986 film Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
So in the fiction, it makes sense.
They're going to be imagining David Bowie.
Yes, they're going to be imagining mulleted David Bowie.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the wonderful thing is that totally fits the fiction of their idea of the Goblin King is going to shape what the Goblin King looks like and acts like and is. Oh boy. All right. Long walk to our 4 qualities of a good Dark Lord, but hopefully we've demonstrated we can see all 4 of those qualities in Jareth. And now we get into him as a Dark Lord, his powers and dominions. So, the basic stat block, I knew I wanted it to be one of the Eladrin. In modern canons, you had 4 stat blocks for seasonal Eladrin. Mm-hmm. And the idea is they're sort of like Feywildy adjacent elves. Like, they wanted them to be a little bit more of, like, the magical Feywildy than, like, your classic D&D elves. So they are connected with seasons and also with emotions. So, like, the winter one has, like, sorrow powers.
Right.
And, like, these are all great, but none of them was like, maybe this one's better. This one's got intimidation stuff because it's, like, fear. This one's got some, like, more, euphoria stuff, like charm stuff because this is spring. This is sort of, there'll be more of a seduction element. We have also read Changeling the Lost. Writers of this Monster Manual entry. But then you had a fantastic idea.
Yes, because as you were saying this, I was like, because he does all of these things. He has all of those modes. And then I was like, wait a minute. What if he has all of those modes because those are the modes you're expecting them to have? What if his Eladrin type changes based on your expectations, which he is exhausted from living up to?
Yes! It's so good. It's like you've got the summer one is fearsome, is the sort of more in the first time he meets her. Mm-hmm. The autumn,
don't defy me.
when he's being more enchanting, it's got charm power, so it's the more courtly, charming Jareth. Spring has the joyful presence, which is another charm ability. That can be sort of your world falls down, kind of. He's coming at you very romantically. And then winter, that's got the sorrow power. So that's within you. Of it, sad-eyed, broken-winged baby bird, Jareth.
in his owl get up.
And it even fits the whole, he's always in a different outfit. I think every time he appears before Sarah, he's in a different outfit. Mm-hmm. So this idea of, he keeps shifting through these different Eladrin stat blocks. And it could even be like a 1 per outfit. Like, this is the owl outfit. This is this sort of like shiny blue purpley riding jacket outfit. Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, speaking of his outfits, for getting back to the, him as a projection of Sarah's mind, that is why they made his pants magic pants. Because he is the projection of a 14-year-old girl's mind.
Yes.
So, yeah, this is a word of the costume designer.
And, all of the Eladrin stat blocks have basically what we want with Jareth. They all have the phase step ability, which I think is important, the teleporting in, teleporting out. They have magic resistance. They have spellcasting abilities. It's just the specific, special seasonal ability changes from stat block to stat block, which I love this. Thank you for this idea. You nailed it. You squared the circle. And speaking of Eladrin, this is a very important point we are going to be coming back to later. And it's another one of those reasons we decided to go more with a domain of dread, a Ravenloft domain of dread than a domain of delight. And that is, Jareth is the Goblin King and totally is an archfey, but also kind of isn't.
Yeah.
Because he is a dang cheater.
He is a dang cheater.
A dang bald-faced cheater.
And not the way the Fae cheat.
Yes, that's critical.
Yes, because the thing that we kept coming back to for this was when he said, how about upping the stakes, and zips the clock forward.
Yes.
No, they had agreed on the terms.
Yes, 13 hours.
The terms are 13 hours. Now, when she said piece of cake, if he had tricked her into saying that it was too easy and she wanted more of a challenge, but he didn't lead her that extra step. Yes. He just threw a temper tantrum because she said his labyrinth is too easy.
If there's a ton of ways he could have accomplished this in legit Fae play style. If she'd agreed, if he said, how about upping the stakes? And she'd said, sure, then nope, you open yourself up for that, Sarah.
Yeah.
The whole, world falls down. If it's this whole, you poison her so she falls asleep and loses a ton of time. The oubliette, you fall in a pit and you're just stuck in this hole for a really long time. But he doesn't do any of those things.
Yeah.
He just says, well, I'll show you who's a piece of cake. And cuts like an hour.
Yeah.
And that is not
That's not fair.
That's not fair.
You know what the basis for comparison is? It's the rules that we set out at the beginning of this challenge, Jareth.
Yes.
That's what the basis for comparison
That's
is.
the basis of comparison. The thing you agreed to. The conditions you set that you are now arbitrarily changing.
Yes.
So, yes. This is also why we kind of have him starting as a mortal, coming in the Labyrinth, becoming the Goblin King, and then becoming a Dark Lord. Just, he is a dang cheater.
Yes.
And we have to keep bringing up Coraline, but, like, the other mother would never have done that.
No, she did the whole, like, knocking Coraline out so she loses a lot of time, but she would never have, like...
Just advance the clock.
So, like, it's the whole, he got wished into being the Goblin King. He's kind of cosplaying as an archfey, and he's doing a dang fine job of cosplaying as archfey because he's David Bowie. But he's not really an archfey.
Yeah. Like, fundamentally for both of us, we're like, no, a fae would not play a game that way. They would not just bald-faced, flat-out cheat.
Yeah.
And he does. And we also see something like that when we get to the center of the labyrinth. And I think this has very important implications, the flat-out cheating in the center of the labyrinth, for the whole idea of what navigating the labyrinth is and what the challenge of the labyrinth is. And we will come back to that when we talk a bit more about the running adventures in the labyrinth section.
Yeah.
Then we have his special powers. And, this was a whole thing. We really, like... Because he's a very un-D&D character.
Yes.
Like, if you're trying to, like, take a D&D stat block for everything Jareth does, it's going to be a hot mess.
Yeah, he's going to have a gazillion powers, but he only ever uses them once.
So, we are starting with the crystals, because, like, we have to have the crystals.
Oh, yeah.
Huge thing, huge, like, visual signature. Very on-brand. He's a strong sense of brand identity.
Yes. So,
first off, we're imagining that the crystals are his arcane foci. They're like, whenever almost every time he's doing a spell, quote-unquote spell, he is using a crystal in some way. Turning it into a snake, turning it into a scarf, using it for hypnosis, turning it into a peach, turning it into the cleaner. And you came up with this to back to Changeling the Lost.
Yes.
I have Changeling the Lost was on your bingo card.
Oh, it sure should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there is a thing, and it's a very fairy tale thing. Yeah. They hadn't Changeling the Lost, that the Fae always have some kind of tell. That, no matter what shape they take, this Fae will always have golden eyes. This Fae will always have red on them somewhere. And we see that with Jareth, too, that he always has the tell of there's either the crystal ball or there's owl imagery. Just straight up, he is an owl or he's in the owl clothes. When he's the beggar with the nothing tra-la-la, there's the little crystal ball that rolls up and jumps into his mug first. So you can have the idea, if you want to do stuff with kind of like shape-shifting trickster Jareth, that there's going to be either owl stuff or crystal ball stuff involved.
And with the crystals, we are imagining that he can use them for scrying, obviously. That's the most D&D thing about them. Anywhere in the labyrinth, he's scrying. He gets +10 to the scry roll. He can show you your dreams. He can create illusions. He can kind of use them as sort of that detect thought. For non-illusion stuff, he can do a lot of powerful other stuff if you accept it as a gift. I think once again, very fairy tale.
Yes.
And at that whole, he couldn't just zap Sarah and world falls down. Like, it had to be, she has to eat the peach. She has to take it.
And she didn't accept it as a gift from him. She accepted it as a gift from Hoggle, but you know what? It was still a gift.
That is legit fairy.
That
is legit fairy right there.
And also, even in the beginning, when he was, offering her dreams with the crystal and everything, she had to accept that as a gift. And you totally, like, by the rules we are setting out here, by the Jareth we are making here, if she had accepted it, she would have gotten sucked in, and he would have been able to just, like, feed off her and drain her and get definition from her until she was a husk and then moved on. And that... if you accept it as a gift, that gives him a lot more potential. You've got your world falls down. You can create an extraplanar dreamscape based on your dream. Like, it's going to be pulling from your mind, pulling from your dreams, pulling from your subconscious. Messing with your memory.
And if you accept it as a gift, you have a disadvantage on the wisdom save. That one thing was, we were like, okay, if he has these powers, why isn't he just spamming cleaners?
Yeah.
Like, why is it... We stopped thinking like a narrative fantasy filmmaker and thought like Dungeons and Dragons people. I'm like, why isn't he just spamming cleaners? And so we are imagining that when he uses the crystals, when he does spells, that he does use his spell slots. And he has this huge variety of potential spells he can do, basically anything that makes narrative sense. but he uses spell slots.
Yeah. Or also, if you want to get into a whole weird mini-game system for it, when we get into incorporating the older material, Nightmare Lands has you covered.
They sure do.
Its mental fortitude points and inner peace score.
Inner peace score. If only Sarah gets her inner peace score.
Nightmare Lands stats actually work super well for this, so...
And that's why he also needs minions. Like, why doesn't he do this stuff? Why is he sending Hoggle to do this? And why is he, like, sending the Goblin Guards after them? Why isn't he just doing all of it himself? And on the one hand, it's because he has limited spell slots. And on the other hand, it's because he doesn't like interacting with the Ceres too much. Because that's a situation he's not in control. And especially the more they get, the sort of more upset he's getting, the closer they're getting to his heart. And they're not necessarily as afraid of him anymore. And that's part of why he throws such a petulant temper tantrum when he confronts her.
Yes. Sorry, I just realized the whole, like, if he sends the goblins after her, like, if he sends Hoggle and Hoggle fails, whatever, it's Hoggle, of course Hoggle fails, but if he goes in and he fails,
that's embarrassing.
That's a thing.
Which is that whole, he's not letting anyone close to his heart. He's got they're all his defenses. Stop anyone from getting to his true heart. So then there was a part that was particularly kind of tricky to do, and that was Prince of the Land of Stench.
I love that that's the power name.
Because it's like a version of contingency. Like, he says, if she kisses you, you'll be Prince of the Land of Stench. And I've always had the impression that he kind of, like, curses him. That he's not, like, watching him through the crystal with his finger on the stench button. Like, ready to, oh yeah, got him! Jabs the button. It's like, no, he kind of puts out there a curse that if X happens, it will have Y effect. Which is good. We have that in D&D as contingency.
Yeah.
So we can...
And it's so fairy tale that he can cast these curses.
Yes. But we are also imagining that he has to tell you. Like, he can't just, like, think it really hard that Hoggle will be Prince of the Land of Stench. No, he has to tell you.
Or he can't tell somebody else that Hoggle's going to be Prince of the Land of Stench. Like, no, he has to say, if X happens, then Y happens. He's just Fey enough that he has to do that, and then that's set in the rules of the Labyrinth. Or maybe even the fact that, like, he inherited the Labyrinth from an actual Fey, so the Labyrinth has the Fey rules that it's like, no, Buster, you gotta give him your offense.
You gotta give him a fair warning for the curse. So he's also, as we mentioned, minions. He's got guards, he's got armies of goblins of various silly weapons, and they all obey him without question, and they all fear him and kind of are trying to, cozy up to him. And
they all fear him, love him, and do as he says.
And then, of course, we have closing the borders. What could it look like when Jareth closes the borders?
Gosh.
Mist,
clearly.
Snow. No, you can't escape the labyrinth. Yeah. Just, you are in the labyrinth, and any mundane or magical means you try will just loop you back to the beginning of the labyrinth. That's a box we are contractually obligated to check off, but I feel like I've just wasted everyone's time.
It's even worse than Maleficent.
Yeah, right. So, finally, in the Dark Lord write-ups in Van Ritten's Guide to Ravenloft, they have the role-playing trait Ideal, Bond, and Flaw, and they do those in the form of quotes, and we always want to do that as well. And this is one where there's really an abundance of material, and also we know that this is going to be long, so we're saving time where we can. So we're not going to do the just open, discuss a big bag of quotes. We each picked our suggestions, and we're each going to kind of pitch our role-playing trait Ideal, Bond, and Flaw quotes, see if we had any doubling up, and see which one we agree is the best one.
Also, I wanted to be able to go in and pick Jareth quotes, but I didn't want to rob myself of hearing Tom's Jareth impression. So, honey, doesn't have to be a good Jareth impression.
Alright. So, role-playing trait. Do you want to go first or want me to go first?
Sure. So, the labyrinth is a piece of cake, is it? Let's see how you deal with this little slice.
Nice. We've mentioned as a very critical quote in our conception of this guy and in our conception of interacting with this guy. All right, so mine is, go back to your room, play with your toys and your costumes. Forget about the baby.
I love the way he says baby.
Baby. Yeah, so mine was this is the initial meeting. This is how he'll approach the PCs in their, initial encounter with him. I'm invincible. Just leave. There's nothing you can do. Give up right now, because he wants him to give up. We talked about that.
Yeah.
But I also get yours with the cheating.
The cheating, the petulance, the, everything's a piece of cake, well, meh. And even though just game playing,
I like that. I think I'm
I like
good.
yours too, though.
Okay,
so
we'll come back.
Yeah, we'll come back.
So what's your ideal?
I have reordered time, I have turned the world upside down, and I've done it all for you.
I basically have that as the bond. I have that whole section of the bond. Like for the bond, I have the, everything that you wanted I have done. You asked shall be taken. I took him. You cowered before me. I was frightening. Reorder time. Turn the world upside down. I've done it all for you. I'm exhausted from living up to your expectations. Isn't that generous? Mm-hmm. And so I thought bond, because once again, this is the big line talking about his relationship with Sarah.
See, okay, so my bond, I'm gonna skip ahead to bond because I feel very strongly about my bonds, and I actually I have my bond in every place except trait.
Okay.
I realized this is his overarching bond, no matter who the Sarah is. Mm-hmm. I move the stars for no one.
Ooh.
The idea that, like, he always says he's doing this, he's doing that, he's doing everything for you, but he's not.
Oh,
it's all about him. It's all about his autonomy and his independence. And ultimately, he'll reorder time. He'll turn the world upside down, but he moves the stars for no one.
Move the stars for no one. That's really good. Ooh, yeah, okay.
I had that as his flaw and ideal at various points before settling on bond,
So, for my ideal, I had the stop. Look at what I'm offering you. Your dreams. Just fear me, love me, do as I say, and I will be your slave.
I had just fear me, love me, do as I say, and I will be your slave as his flaw. Mm-hmm. Okay, if she's doing what you say, then she's your slave. So, even your idea of giving in is all about controlling her. So.
For the flaw, I had the don't defy me. You're no match for me. Like the arrogance and then once again just trying to get you to give up. But no, I like a lot what you're saying. So I can absolutely fear me, love me, do as I say, and I'll be your slave as the flaw. Even in terms of that being the sort of paradox of his idea of what like love could be.
Yeah.
Okay, bond. I moved the stars for no one. And then ideal. What's your ideal again?
For ideal, I had the every order time I turn the world upside down and I've done it all for you. That's kind of his idea of who he is. I could also see sticking with yours as the bond and doing I move the stars for no one as the ideal.
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool.
Let's do that, yeah. And then...
Gosh, because you had go back to your room, play with your toys and your costumes, forget about the baby.
The baby.
And I had the labyrinth as a piece of cake, so let's see how you deal with this little slice. One is him in aggro mode and one is him in kind of his...
No, I'm thinking let's go with yours because PCs are going to go right to... They're going to be right up in his grill. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
PCs are going to PC.
Yeah.
Jareth is going to go to aggro mode real fast. Real fast. So what's the labyrinth?
The labyrinth is a piece of cake, is it? Let's see how you deal with this little slice.
No, that's going to be like scene one. Like there's not going to be a whole build up to the PCs defying him. It's going to be like scene one. PCs are going to PC. So you're cool with bond, that whole bit?
Sounds good.
Isn't that generous?
Yeah.
Just because that's his relationship with the Sarah. Like the bond sort of has to be with the Sarah. Mm-hmm. And so that's his whole thing is everything I've done for you.
Yeah, sounds great. If we wanted to simplify it, we could have it just be everything I've done for you. But I like the whole thing. So
if I could flip the bond in the ideal, I would go for that just to have the symmetry of the everything I've done for you. I move the stars for no one, but I'm tragically. Yeah. That's not the way they do it.
No.
So, yeah, okay, excellent. So we have our role-playing trait, ideal, bond, and flaw. We have our exhaustive description of our conception of Jareth, the Goblin King, as a Ravenloft Darklord. And now let's talk about the land, the domain of dread that he is the Darklord of. Let's talk about our idea of the Goblin King's Labyrinth in a section we like to call...
The Land. The Land. The Labyrinth follows a logic more akin to tales of the Feywild than to our own world. Walls shift when one's back is turned. A door that leads to a forest when pulled might open to a hedge maze when pushed. A journey through a subterranean cavern ends atop a hill beneath open sky, even though the cavern never once sloped upwards. Another feature of the Labyrinth, perhaps even stranger, was how familiar everything seemed. There was nothing so prosaic as entering a maze that looked precisely like the halls of the beast's castle, or encountering a talking cat. Nonetheless, everything seemed jumbled together from images and ideas that existed in my own mind, like some kind of dream. It was spring when I left Paradise Falls, yet the Labyrinth was in the full glory of autumn, with brilliantly colored trees, crisp breezes, and air that smelled of apples and wood smoke. I am sure that I need not tell my patron why autumn looms large in my mind. The forest through which I traveled was not the Xennial, nor Mononoke Forest, nor Sherwood, but the looming trees and the sense of being watched reminded me of all three. The same held true for the people I encountered. I did not recognize anyone within the labyrinth, yet I had the strange feeling that I had met all of them before. The soft-spoken red and green clockwork golem, the talking badger in a cleric's habit, the young woman made of stardust. The only exception, the time when I could clearly recognize people and places from my own life, was when I took a bite from an apple but I can scarcely recall that now, as though it were a dream that dissolved upon waking. Curiously, I found that each segment of the labyrinth had its own distinctive character and challenges. The red and orange firefly-like insects that beset my companions and me along the shoreline, attempting to persuade me to save my own skin and leave my companions for dead, did not follow us into any other area of the labyrinth. Nor did the trio of tiny masked goblins in the black and angular maze who attempted to push me into a sack and take me back to the beginning. Residents of the labyrinth were aware of certain universal areas, to be sure. The castle, the Goblin City, the Bog of Eternal Stench, but they had little knowledge or curiosity about anything beyond their doorsteps. It was as though each area of the labyrinth were its own separate dream that did not bleed into the dreams before and after it.
So the domain of the labyrinth, we have basically three sections, three main components, three main regions, if you will. We have the labyrinth itself, which is the large one. Then within the center of that, we have the Goblin City. Then within we have the Goblin King's castle.
It's like nesting dolls.
Exactly. And of course, in the very center of the castle, in the very heart of the labyrinth itself, is his heart.
Yes.
We could go through the movie and we could give you a bunch of different locations specifically from the movie, but if we did that, we're not giving you a proper labyrinth experience. We're actually going to be taking a lot here from our Christmas Carol episode, where this is a mindscape, and this is not a set of objective locations. It's not like, Barovia, where you go there, and there's like Valakai, and Barovia Village, and Castle Ravenloft, and they're just there in this geographic space. It's not like if you personally were to go to the labyrinth, there would be like the maze with the worm, and you can't see the turns, and then there's the one that's the hedge maze with Ludo in it, and then there's the two doors that give you and then no.
Unless you need to learn not to take anything for granted.
Exactly. The labyrinth is the mindscape of the Sarah, whoever the Sarah is. So we cannot give you a lot of details on what the labyrinth was going to be like if you were in a labyrinth session, because that has to come out of the specific Sarah, either your PC or NPC who's being the Sarah in that. And this is like a dream they're having. This is something made from their memories. Now, this is tricky. Yeah. Because Labyrinth isn't Wizard of Oz.
No.
And that's one, like, you could slide it to Wizard of Oz, but in the movie as is, it's not Wizard of Oz. So, like, Sarah's stepmother isn't the trash lady. Like, she never runs into her father. It's not like, here are these people on the farm in Kansas, and she is meeting analogs of them. And the evil lady trying to take her dog turned into a witch during the tornado. It's much subtler. It's much more like the stuff in her room shapes the labyrinth. Not the most important, like, people or relationships or specific stuff she's thinking about.
Yeah. So it is a lot more like a dream. It's much less on the nose. Like, I have had dreams that are very on the nose.
Yeah,
But, a lot of times it's just kind of just the random stuff going through your head, going through your mind, like, in your day-to-day life. So
if, for PCs, NPCs, this is, you have to look at that equivalent of stuff like, what do they have in their bedroom? What books do they enjoy? We have that, like, there's Wizard of Oz, and there's Snow White, and there's, like, and all that's going into the labyrinth. And what is the equivalent of that on your PC's bookshelf? Yeah. It might be a useful place to bring in some, like, backstory stuff, because that's stuff that's, it's not in the here and now, it's less immediate, and that'll make it feel less Wizard of Oz. If you're bringing in, well, your game is set in Darkon, but they're from Borca, then bringing in a lot of Borca in. Right. Which I'm always in favor of, but, So you're into everything. You immediately were like, oh, I know what I do. I know the, like, bits of details of backstory and bits of other places they've been I would bring in. Then good for you, you're set. But one way you can have that slightly more subtle Sarah-like influence on the shape of the labyrinth is the environment.
Yeah.
That you can have a lot of the places they're going through be the adventuring environments that your party is familiar with. So they've been to a dark forest. They've been to the Underdark. They've been to, like, a crashed spaceship. That's just, like, bringing in the visuals of those places for that idea of journey.
Yeah. So, like, if they've been to Tempest, they can go through this forest that's, like, vaguely reminiscent of Tempest. There can be a section where they have to, like, figure out a way to get across this giant lake because they had that thing where they went to the Sea of Sorrows.
Yeah.
And so it's, evocative of that.
And so that's one way to bring it in. And one thing we can say about the Labyrinth is you usually have these clear, distinctive zones.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's usually Sarah goes into a zone. It's very clearly a part of the Labyrinth. And it's different and it's distinct and it has its own identity and its own visual style. Also, that it's all sorts of different types of terrain. So, like, it's not, she starts out with your classic Labyrinth. It's just a walled maze she's trying to navigate through. But then later that turns into a hedge maze. And then later that turns into just like a forest. So, like, when she's doing with the Fireys, there's not like a maze. The trees aren't like growing in, rows with paths from left to right and doubling back. But it's the idea of navigating this dark, spooky, overgrown forest.
Yeah.
So the great thing is you take any kind of environment and you can make that be these different zones of the Labyrinth. To give you some examples, because I get that with this kind of thing, we're like, come up with something. Have it be good. Like, examples really help here.
Yes. If you're looking at your podcatcher of choice, then you can see that there's a D's journal there, and if you're not a patron, there isn't normally a D's journal there. And that's because D's journal, it's the in-character narration bits, and then at the end, I give an explanation, kind of a little behind-the-scenes look at what was going on there.
Kind of a director's commentary.
Kind of director's commentary, yeah. And I wanted, because we're getting into all this, well, you could, do this kind of thing with the NPCs and, have things vaguely evocative in the setting. And because this episode is so long, we can't go through and do that with a whole bunch of characters like we do.
Like we do with Christmas Carol.
Yeah. So I'm making that available to everyone so we can kind of go in and break down why I made the choices I made with D. And if you are a patron, hopefully there will be something special coming out just for you. Don't worry, you're not going to lose your patron bonus.
This is good. You're going to like it.
Yes,
it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
We're working on it. But to use a Labyrinth-specific example, there's the Coronation comic, which is quite good.
Which is on Hoopla if your library has Hoopla.
Yes, it is one of, we read a couple of Labyrinth-related things for research, and there were some that are just like a fun little short story set in the Labyrinth, like Ludo has a cold, so he's sneezing and wrecking everything. But there's some that trying to be sort of a longer form story, and this was the best of those, I think.
I think I preferred Masquerade, but Coronation was really good.
And the Sarah character in Coronation is actually from, like, 1800s Venice. And so it's really neat that it's much more watery and much more ship-based. Like, a lot more of navigating the Labyrinth is getting on boats and moving through canals. There's even a really neat thing where there is, there's the false alarms, but instead of being, like, these giant stone faces, they're actually, like, this line of ships, and it's the ship's figureheads.
Yeah.
Saying, beware, beware.
And the kind of valiant Didymus character is, like, this French Revolutionary worm. She's my favorite.
She's so great. And then to bring an example from a Disney character, we were imagining Moana. Like, if you had Moana as a Sarah, then you're going to have a lot more sea imagery. That you're going to have, it's not going to have the big walls of stone. It might have some tunnels, some caves. It might have, like, a lot of, like, overgrown jungle, like, cliffs and rocks and stuff.
Definitely coconuts.
And even if it's more grassy, like hedge mazy, there's going to be a lot more, like, seashell imagery. Maybe, like, it's going to be much more like a coral reef, like sort of above water, like coral reef you're navigating.
Yeah. Kind of going back to, we had Elsa in our Christmas Carol episode, and if you had Elsa and Anna, then there might be kind of like, some of the zones are these sunshiny mountain mazes strung on Arundel's spring and everything, and some stuff is going to be the more traditional mazes because, they're at, I could be wrong, but I don't think that Moana would really have a concept of a labyrinth with stone walls. Whereas, with Anna and Elsa, they would. And then, you could get into stuff with, like, ice walls and everything. They're really messing with them. Also, so it's not just going through these environments that are part of their mind. This is, once again, connecting to our Christmas Carol episode, that it's going through the mind, it's going through the self, that a big part of it is overcoming flaws. A big part of it is learning that it's not fair, but that's the way it is.
Yes, exactly.
That you're growing as a person, which Jareth can't do.
Yes.
So this is his kryptonite, and the fact that you're able to grow and Jareth isn't is the thing that ultimately means that you can escape the labyrinth, which he will never do.
Yes.
He cannot have self-reflection and personal growth. So a big part of progressing is not about solving the labyrinth.
Right.
It's about solving yourself.
But yeah, we're going to touch on this more. We talked about adventures in the labyrinth, but I think that's a critical thing. The labyrinth is not a space you solve with an intelligence save or an intelligence investigation save. That can help, but fundamentally, yeah, it's not a puzzle that you solve. Like, fundamentally, the labyrinth is the journey through the heart.
And the great thing is, again, it's got those distinctive zones. You can have it be that each zone is like representing a little life lesson that they need to learn somehow. That there's some kind of puzzle that they solve that relates to one of their flaws, and then they get to solve it and move on. So, talking about like the journey through and going through our flaws, there's the novelization of Labyrinth. It's really good. We're not going to do a book club of dread about it because it's actually good.
Yeah.
But one thing in it that I love, I always go back and I watch the movie through this lens now, and it's great. I mentioned earlier the whole that she's got that picture on her mirror of her mom and David Bowie, because Jareth kind of represents her mom's boyfriend, and she's got these feelings for her mom's boyfriend and everything. And one thing that comes out in the book is that her mom actually left her. We don't go get a whole lot into why, just that her mom left her, and now she's this, like, successful stage actress, and she's just living this glamorous life with Jeremy, her co-star, and, like, Sarah goes out with her for her birthday, and it's just this, wonderful, she feels so glamorous and so grown up, and Jeremy is making all of these snide remarks about the waitstaff, because of course he is, and they go swimming, and he pretends to drown to make them laugh, and, like, alarms the lifeguard, because what a chuckle.
Yeah, right, gosh.
And then at the end, they take her, they drop her off at her dad's, they're like, bye, honey, we're gonna go and, live our glamorous life now. And so everything she goes through with Toby is the choice to not become her mother. That there is a child who is in her care, and she's getting this chance to just, swan off and play with her costumes and be a pretty princess and have a glamorous life. And then, when she gets the world falls down, it's like having that with David Bowie. And she chooses not to do that and to accept her responsibilities for her family member. And I love that, and that's such a really cool and interesting angle to give to the journey.
So that is some advice about sort of some of the visuals, the environment, some advice about the navigating the sort of moral journey and moral navigation. The labyrinth is solving yourself, not solving a puzzle. But the other critical element in the labyrinth is the NPCs.
Yes.
Which for the most part are just as much coming out of the mindscape, coming out of the dreams of the Sarah, or reflecting things they need to learn. So, like, with the trash lady, we don't have, like, an obvious analog like we do with, like, Didymus or Hoggle in her room, but it represents sort of something she needs to learn. That's another one everybody remembers, the trash lady. So that really sticks in your head. And one is the obvious Wizard of Oz adjacent, your Hoggles or your Didymuses, of it is an NPC based on something from the Sarah's mind, from their memories. So once again, I would not go full Wizard of Oz. I would not have, like, I am your father, but I'm a mean goblin. But you want to have things that evoke those memories, evoke those people, but are not just them in a scarecrow costume.
Right.
I would, as a potential thing, you come up with the Labyrinth NPC, and then you use the voice or the mannerisms you use for whenever you're doing that, like, real-world NPC. So, like, you once get one of your PCs, has a very stormy relationship with their father, and you want to bring that in. You could have a goblin, and the goblin isn't like their father in a goblin hat, but you're using kind of some of the mannerisms or using some of the voice that you do when you're doing those scenes between the PC and their father.
Or, like, if there's imagery that's connected with a character, then you could bring some of that in. So when we were brainstorming this, an example that I immediately thought of was that, again, going back to Borka, in our game, there was an NPC who was very significant to Chris's character, who raised snakes, and she would milk them for venom. And so it would, like, having some kind of, like, Naga or something who doesn't look like her, but is clearly her.
Right.
Like, would
evokes
be...
her. Yeah, that's a great example. However, they don't all need to be from the Sarah. Like, this is our deviation from the movie, because the movie is the whole, this is kind of all in Sarah's head in a sense. It all comes from her. But because we are imagining, the Labyrinth does go on existing. It gets Sarahs, and then more Sarahs, and then more Sarahs, and more Sarahs. It goes on existing. So you could also have some NPCs hanging around that were former Sarahs that, like, lost and they became goblins and are stuck in the Labyrinth.
Yeah, if you have a cool idea for a Labyrinth NPC and you can't think of a way to tie them into the Sarah, that's okay, we've got you covered. So, like, some of the NPCs, like, the trash lady might be, like, a materialist who was brought in by, the trash lady's temptations. She was kind of weighed down by all her stuff.
Like, in the Labyrinth, the movie, I could totally see, like, if Sarah were a little younger. If Sarah were, like, 10 or 11 or 12, then that would be the kind of supreme temptation, as opposed to, like, World Falls Down.
Yeah. Also, incidentally, once again, in the novel, the music box was the birthday gift that her mother and Jeremy gave her that night out. So, her rejecting World Falls Down, and then the last straw that's all, this is not junk, yes it is, I've got to go save Toby. That was a very fraught and meaningful moment. Yeah.
And you'll notice, eagle-eyed Labyrinth fans, that when she's back in her room, like, the first thing she does is take the pictures down, and I think the second thing is put the music box on.
Yeah, but the stuffed animals, other than giving nice lots of Toby, the stuffed animals all stay, because they're not toxic.
Yes.
But yeah, so the trash lady could be that kind of Sarah. The wise man could be some kind of, like, he has to be the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
Or, like, some kind of, like, Burgess Meredith in Time Enough at Last for Twilight Zone. Like, all he wants to do is be left alone to read, and he's being, I can empathize. But, he's being a real jerk about it.
He's got that, like, throne of books, which is a great imagery for a antisocial nerd.
One of the Fireys is a Sarah who wanted to be wild and free. Just, you could come up with stuff for all of the NPCs and how they were people before. And what vices were landed them there, and have, like, little glimmers of their human selves coming out. Very old carnival
Just hitting all the Rachel bingo card is...
It's a Labyrinth,
Orca,
it's old carnival, it's not even my birthday.
Oh, this is your birthday present.
Oh, okay.
And the nice thing is then these interactions with these, like, old Sarahs, these, like, sort of, fossil Sarahs, that could be clues as to solving the Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And not even solving the Labyrinth in terms of just, like, go here and push this button and it'll open a door. Like, realizing these are people that gave in to those sort of worst impulses and vices. And then, like, that's sort of the key. So if you wanted to, like, really make that clearer to your PCs that they have to grow, as you said so excellently, it's not solving a puzzle, it's solving yourself.
Thank you.
And you meet a bunch of people that did not, in fact, solve themselves. That could be a clue there. And this can also be bringing in some interesting geography, especially if you want to, like, really develop one of these older Sarahs. That we have the junkyard, and that's, like, that's the thing immediately around the city. And we're actually kind of imagining the junkyard got a lot of pieces from older Sarahs. Like, that's why there kind of is a junkyard there. It's like every time a Sarah either wins or gets defeated and becomes a goblin, the sort of maze of that Sarah's mind kind of gets scrapped and dumped in the junkyard.
Yeah.
So you could find all these wonderful, like, bits of old Sarah mindscapes. Even it's going to be a great place to put in a lot of stuff from the movie Labyrinth.
That would be, oh my gosh,
this is where you find the two doors, or you find or you find, like, pieces of a smashed up suburban bedroom. And this is something from the Masquerade comic you mentioned, but the idea that sometimes when Sarahs fail, they end up in, like, these little sort of psychic oubliettes in the junkyard.
Yeah, kind of the equivalent of if Sarah had just been staying in her bedroom forever, that could have been like the World Falls Down bubble. Yeah. That could have just been like a little bubble she stayed in forever.
Yeah. And so that could, another thing where if you want to kind of give clues to what's going on when they get to the junkyard, they could find pieces from some of the older Sarahs, especially if they've, like, really spent time with an old Sarah NPC. And then they maybe even find these, like, they clear away some junk and see a window and look in the window, and it's a pretty black-haired girl in her suburban bedroom, like, playing with her toys.
Oh, man, how creepy would it be to, like, you're going through the junkyard and you see a couple of these fully furnished rooms with people sitting in them, like, going about their day in their junkyard, and then you find your own room.
Yeah, so good. That's so good. Gotta have that. And so we've mentioned a lot of this is fluid in terms of what the labyrinth's going to look like, how we're going to describe the physical space. We're not giving you like specific zones here. But the core concept, it's the loop back to that thing of, we've touched on it before, and the loop back to that thing Rachel said that is going to be like a motto of this project of the, you're not solving a puzzle, you're solving yourself, is the labyrinth isn't a puzzle.
No.
Because the labyrinth is cheaty. Jareth cheats. We've touched on this before.
He's a cock-a-doodie cheater.
He is a cock-a-doodie cheater. And that there are some, like, legit Fae cheating he does. Like, we're talking about this with the helping hands. And the whole, like, both are wrong choices.
Yeah.
The hands say, do you want to go up or down? And the answer is, honestly, you don't want to do either. They're both bad choices. And that's a totally legit Fae thing.
Yes.
Like, here's your choice. They are both bad.
Yeah,
but we're not going to tell you.
We don't know what would have happened if she'd chosen up, but it would have been bad.
Yeah. But he flat out cheat. He advances the clock. And this is our core conceit of the challenge of the labyrinth. The challenge of the labyrinth is not solving a puzzle. It's not navigating a maze. It's not solving riddles.
Yeah.
The core challenge of the labyrinth is, are you going to give up or not? And fundamentally, the details and the rules don't matter. The riddles don't matter. The puzzles don't matter. The challenges don't matter. The clock apparently doesn't matter.
Everything's made up and the points don't matter.
If you give up, Jareth wins.
Because that is what he's trying to get Sarah to do all along.
The entire movie.
He tries to get her to give up in the beginning. When she's about to go into the labyrinth, he tells her to turn back. Like, when she's in the oubliette, he's frustrated that she's gotten that far because she should have given up. Like, and then our take on it is though just that everything he was doing along the way, it wasn't about Toby. It was about getting Sarah to give up.
Yeah.
And if she had given up, then he would have put her in a little bubble and been able to just keep feeding on her until she was used up, and then the labyrinth would have gone dormant again.
And that the clock doesn't even really matter.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter to him, so it doesn't matter to you either.
Yeah. The only thing with the clock is that once the time runs out, Sarah believes she's lost.
Yes. And she won't give up. And we have that within you. That's an infinity maze, right? That wasn't like Sarah got to Toby because she figured out the correct path through the Escher room. It was, no, that is an infinity maze. If she had kept just running up and down stairs, she would have been running up and down stairs forever.
Yeah, she had to jump.
There's no right way. She had to jump. And that was the thing. He wanted her to give up by giving her an infinity maze. But she figured out the way forward to not give up. And as long as you do not give up, you will keep moving forward through the labyrinth until you get to the center.
Yeah.
If at any point you give up, Jareth wins. Like, that's the real game.
To get Jareth to blink first.
Yes, exactly.
It's not a labyrinth. It's a staring contest. So with the Goblin City, our idea of that is that it actually is more stable.
Yeah.
Because the original Sarah, the person who Jareth threw under a bus to be the Goblin King, her soul is kind of the foundation of the Goblin City. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep quoting that Art
take
of
a drink.
Yep. But in that Art of Labyrinth book that Tom got me, bingo, there was a thing when it was describing the Goblin City, and they were saying they kind of wanted it to look like a fairy tale village that had gone to seed. This idea that, like, the goblins had taken the village from some kind of, like, cute little hobbit creatures and were just squatting there. So you don't necessarily have to do that imagery if you don't want to, but just having it be some kind of incongruous, like, this doesn't look like a goblin city. What's going on here? Some kind of thing that's, like, built from the fairy tale dreams of Jareth's mom / older sister / girlfriend / whatever. It's less personal. It's less of a dreamscape. It's more of a stable reality to interact with. And as you go, when you're literally getting past Jareth's defenses, he's not pulling any of his nonsense because this is real. You're past the mask. You're getting to the real him.
Right. Like, he's not being cute anymore. He is full, call out all the goblins, call out the guards, call out the artillery, the cavalry, everything. He is panicking and he's sending everything against you because you're starting to get toward his heart.
Yeah.
So then, of course, we have the castle, and that's if you get past the goblins, past the city, past all the sort of physical defenses, you get to the castle, and now you are getting into his real self, and you're getting into his heart. And as we mentioned, like the labyrinth, this is something where you just have to keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
You just, as long as you don't give up, as long as you keep defying him, you will keep moving forward. And if you do that final, like, leap, that final refusing to give up, you get to the center. And this is, that part's so good. It's
gosh, it's so good.
It's like I mentioned, I love that the goblins, like, in the beginning when Sarah's telling the story and they're starting to, like, wake up and listen for her say the words, I love that it's in this just kind of black void.
Mm-hmm.
And the goblins are like waking up as Sarah's telling the story. And I love that this is not just like a big room.
Yeah.
That this is once again a kind of weird void with pieces of the labyrinth crumbling. Like you get the sense that the labyrinth is disintegrating around them.
So cool. That was even, once again, in that same book.
We warned you.
Yeah. David Bowie was saying when he wrote Within You, like, he wanted to be kind of, like, evoking this, like, almost Ozymandias, like, crumbling power. And you totally get that feeling from the instrumentation, especially. Just, so good.
And, like, I love this. I love that scene. Even Within You, he's not interacting with Sarah much, but the way he's singing it is so, like, emotional. And you're like, no, this is, like, we're getting intimacy. We're getting his real self. Like, Sarah's getting past his defenses. And he seems so much on the back foot.
Yes. Up until this point, he's always been in control of the scene. And here he's not.
And then when we get to the scene in the center where he's in the owl costume, it's like he's totally on the back foot. He's just, like, scrambling. He is desperate. He is trying to bluster. But Sarah's the one who really is in control of the conversation.
That she's advancing on him.
Yes.
And he's backing away and shrinking in on himself. Like, all of his body language is...
so good.
He's already lost.
So, if you get to the center's intimacy, and that's his ultimate kryptonite. Like, that's the thing that most terrifies him, is the idea of someone seeing the real him. Someone getting to the real him. And we were, like, working on this for a long time, as we mentioned. And at one point I was like, the Labyrinth, he's the Goblin King, but in the center is Jareth. And Jareth is a sad, lonely, tired man.
Yeah.
And, Rachel even noticed, like, his makeup looks older.
Yeah.
In the center. Like, when
he's in his owl get up,
He looks older. He looks tired. He looks just, it's so good.
So good.
This is a great movie. It's not a good movie. It's not a fun movie. It's a great movie.
It's fun also.
It is all those things. So, that is going to be, we have the Labyrinth, we have the Goblin City, we have the castle, we have the Goblin King's heart, we have the terror, tragedy and relatability, the terror of intimacy. It's some quote like the horrible terror of being known. Yeah. And now let's talk about what potentially brought your PCs to hopefully have braved all those challenges and arrived at that center. And met tired, sad, lonely Jareth. Rachel, what do you do with it?
You fight your way to the castle beyond the Goblin City. Take back the child he has stolen.
I love you.
I love you too. Dread possibilities. Eventually, I made my way to the Goblin City, which looked like nothing so much as a quaint fairy tale village gone to seed. All the tricks and illusions of the labyrinth were gone now. Jareth was relying on brute force, sending wave after wave of goblins after me in an attempt to beat me into submission. I was able to get past them with the help of the companions I had met, and I entered the castle to find an empty throne room. And beyond it, a room made of dizzying stairways, where it was impossible to tell up from down, from left from right. Jareth strode along the walls and the undersides of floors as though gravity itself bent to his whims, while I was still at the mercy of the laws of nature. Sitting on a stairway far below me was my Book of Shadows. I had no time for this. I leapt into the void, toward the book, and once again found myself falling with agonizing slowness, as though I had cast Featherfall into a crumbling room that floated in the void. In the center of the room, looking haggard and dressed in a robe of white feathers, was Jareth. I did it. I solved your labyrinth. I found the center. Give me my magic.
Why? So you can go back to scratching for his approval and a few crumbs of his power? He doesn't care about you. You're a pawn to be sacrificed for an interesting magic item. And once he's thrown you aside, will he even remember your name?
I tried not to let the words sting. You think his high opinion matters to me? That I expect him to pat me on the head, perhaps to give me candies for a job well done? Spare me, Jareth. My bluster did not have the effect I intended. Instead, some of the weariness vanished from Jareth's face. His eyes grew clearer, and he began to advance on me, no longer shrinking back from my approach.
You are nothing to him. You don't matter. No one does. There's only one person Aslan has ever loved, and he died a long time ago. But you matter to me. You're the most important person in my world. Stay here with me, and I will cherish you forever. Do you want magic? I'll give you the power to shape the labyrinth to your whim. Do you want to be safe? Nothing enters these walls unless I will it. Everything you want is here with me.
I hesitated. I had no desire to stay, to abandon my family to whatever fate might befall them without my help. Beyond that, beneath the romanticism that even he seemed to believe, Jareth was as much a beautiful predator as the owl whose feathers he wore. I was certain that if I stayed in the labyrinth, things would not be as idyllic as the picture he painted. And yet, I could see a grain of truth in his words. Despite my bravado that had only strengthened him, I do wonder what ultimate purpose I am furthering in this endeavor. And sometimes I fear... Seeing my hesitation, Jareth pressed forward.
I'll be your patron. I'll be your older brother. I'll be anything you need me to be. Just surrender.
I took a deep breath. You're right. If I stayed here, you would hold me securely, and you would never let me go. I could see the beginnings of a smile on his face. As securely as a little girl tied to a chair. Now give me my goddamned magic back! Jareth's smile faltered, and the labyrinth crumbled into nothing around me. I found myself standing once again atop Paradise Falls, my book of shadows at my feet, and the mournful cries of an owl in my ears.
I want adventure and the great ride somewhere.
I want it more than I can tell.
So what brought your band of heavily armed transients into a bizarre adolescent girl mindscape? Presumably not all of them individually wished a baby away at the same time.
Trade caravans?
Trade caravans. Principal exports of the labyrinth.
For trading babies.
Trading babies for wishes. For crystal spheres. It's Labyrinth Economics 101. So this is obviously a question, and it's something we need to address is what gets them there because it's such a weird, specific fairy tale story. And before we get into that, we have kind of another thing we need to talk about, which is the structure of the adventure. Because this is one where it's like a lot of these we can just give you, it's a physical location. Mm-hmm. And they're just, here is a reason for them to go to that physical location, and then the adventure happens. But this one is not that.
Yes.
Because, as we mentioned, it's a weird, teenage girl psychic dreamscape. It is an internal world. This one actually has a bunch in common with A Christmas Carol for that same reason. It's kind of the internal world. It's the dream journey. It's very much anchored in a single person. And just like with The Christmas Carol, to really evoke it, and this is a big challenge for Labyrinth for D&D, one of the biggest challenges, to really evoke Labyrinth, you need to have one Sarah. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be about that Sarah's personal story, their personal wish, their personal desires, their personal relationships. With Christmas Carol, but you'd have that option of the weird nesting doll, like everybody's having their own Christmas Carol.
Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yes, everyone's having their own. I am the Bob Cratchit that exists in Fred Scrooge's head. I am the Fred Scrooge that exists in Bob Cratchit's head.
Yes. And here we don't have that, although we are going to give, if you're already feeling grumpy about this possibility because you want to run the Labyrinth for all your characters, we are going to have an option for how to do that later. Mm-hmm. It's just for pure Labyrinth we're starting with. Yes. You need one, Sarah.
The sort of canon adventure. And even in Labyrinth, watching Labyrinth, you can look at this and you can say, on the one hand, this is very D&D-able, on just externally, plot-wise. If I describe the plot of Labyrinth, it's D&D-able in terms of there's a labyrinth. You have to solve it. There are riddles. There are puzzles. There are traps. You have a group of companions who are kind of using their skills and abilities to overcome those puzzles and traps and enemies and all that and jump on Humongous and knock his helmet off and all that. But you look at Labyrinth and you're like, no, that can't be a D&D adventure because it's Sarah and her amazing friends.
Yes.
Because there is a protagonist to this movie, and everything in the movie orbits around. Like, Sarah is the star, everything orbits, and that even includes, like, all the other, quote-unquote PCs.
Yeah, like, Hoggle at least gets an arc,
yes.
but Didymus and Ludo, like, I love them to death. They don't get arcs.
Mm-hmm. Didymus learns to be less reckless?
No,
Question
he doesn't.
mark? No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
He has them surrounded. So there are kind of two possibilities for evoking Labyrinth, and one is if you want to be straightforward and not get into our high-concept shenanigans, and that is that the PCs are there with the Sarah when she goes into the Labyrinth. We're going to talk a little bit later. There are ways that they can, like, go in and help her afterwards, but, like, this is basically the option where there's a Sarah, and then the PCs are there as themselves, just kind of, like, helping her out. And it has the advantage, it's direct, it's simple, it's your PCs in the Labyrinth, it's not our high-concept nonsense, but it doesn't give you that full Labyrinth feeling because Sarah's not in there with a whole bunch of Labyrinth outsiders. She's in there with a whole bunch of denizens of the Labyrinth.
It's not like she had her, like, this isn't Hocus Pocus in the all-new sequel. She didn't have, like, her crush and her plucky best friend, and they, like, came into the Labyrinth with her and helped her on her adventures. So having, like, this person is the Sarah, and this is her crush, and this is her plucky best friend, and this is her bully who actually has a heart of gold, and they come to understand each other. Like, that's not going to be full Labyrinth.
Yeah, like, in the D stuff, she's in there with kind of, like, these dream versions of people she's encountered. She's not in there with Binks, like she was in Christmas Carol. And so the other version, which, if you want to get weird, if you want to get high concept, and you know that we do.
You want to get nuts, let's get nuts.
And that's, you've got a core Sarah, and in this case, you pretty much have to do a PC. This does not work with an NPC. And they go into the Labyrinth, and the other PCs, you have them, like, come up with the Labyrinth Dweller version of their character.
Yes!
And they're symbolically helping her out. This is, like, kind of her dream version of them. And maybe it's even what their, like, Labyrinth Dweller versions do has some effect on them. Like, the person who's dreaming himself as Hoggle, like, learns to be less cowardly and stand up for himself.
This is like a psychic connection.
Yeah,
so he, like, has the dream memory.
So you use the character sheets and personalities, but, in the fiction, they're kind of a version of Hoggle and Ludo and Didymus. So, like, it can be a full Wizard of Oz. Like, maybe that is exactly what Didymus is like. He's a little fox guy now. Like, he's just your, like, slightly less cartoonishly valiant paladin.
Yeah, or like your swashbuckler rogue.
Yes, just ramped up to 11. Or maybe it's kind of a more indirect, like, Ludo is your druid who always wild shapes into a bear and has int as a dumb cat. So he's there as a big, hairy, dumb guy with nature powers.
Yes, that sounds like... You can probably tell from our energy here that this is what we really think is ideal, and this is what we would do.
But we get it's a lot.
This is a lot.
It's a lot. So if you want to just have your party go in and do the Labyrinth, do that. We don't want to give you the homework of coming up with the goblin versions of your party.
Like, you have to have your paladin and your ranger and your bard and figure out what weird goblins they are.
Like, we're not only giving you homework, we're giving your players homework. Like, okay, guys, you're on the Labyrinth, go home, come up with the Labyrinth version of your character.
But some of you are already like, oh man, this is going to be a super, super duper fun, like, pre-session hangout as we just talk and figure out what kind of weird Labyrinth goblins we are. Who's a little worm with a squeaky voice, and who's a big Ludo, and who's a Didymus. So this is either the best or the worst possibility. You know your group, you know your GMing style. It's what we would do, but we also recognize we are weirdos.
Yes.
So we are high concept, oh boy, homework weirdos.
Yes, we are.
And Hoggle is going to, I think, it's going to be a variant we call Oops All Hoggles.
Yes.
Because Hoggle is the one that has the clearest arc. He is the one that's the most developed as a character. He is the one that has, like, a relationship with Jareth and kind of has to, like, overcome his fear of Jareth, overcome something about Jareth in the same way Sarah does. So, like, that's going to be your model.
Yeah.
It's going to be if Ludo and Didymus had that kind of level of complexity and personality. So, like, if you're making your Labyrinth Dwellers, PC analogs, Oops All Hoggles.
Yeah.
So, then you have... like, what are you there for? Like, kind of what gets you in there? So we've said the basic structure. You're going to have an NPC or a PC who's that anchor Sarah. and everybody else in some way is going to be, like, orbiting them and coming into the labyrinth with them, and they're the one that's going to give the labyrinth its shape and its form and its definition. It's their mind. It's their dream. Mm-hmm. The labyrinth is their dream, and your other people are part of it in some way.
Yeah.
But it's the Sarah's dream. And one obvious one, and this is a great time to mention the Labyrinth. There is sort of a Labyrinth role-playing game. They call it the Adventure Game, and they had it be you're a Labyrinth dweller. Like, everybody's a Labyrinth dweller because they're going with the sort of, the Labyrinth Sarah experiences is basically objectively the Labyrinth. Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, sure. And you're a Labyrinth dweller, and, like, Jareth took something from you. This sounds familiar at all. This is also one of the big adventure hooks for The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which is, so far, the most Labyrinth-adjacent published WotC adventure. So that is a big, bright one there, that you have, Jareth took something from you, and that's what kind of gets your party together in the Labyrinth adventure game. And once again, if you want the more straightforward, this is a fantastic hook for just, this is why this group of people is all journeying into this labyrinth together. And this is like, if you want to do it kind of as more of a one-shot, because we have this as being this very, like, psychological, this would be, a year-and-year campaign when you know them. But if you wanted it to just be kind of like with Wild Beyond the Witchlight, of you come up with a thing that you took from you, and then you have them write down, like, 5 images from their childhood and tell you what their flaw is. And then you can build something out of that. Yeah, that'd be a great one-shot. Yeah. In that case, even a bit more Wizard of Ozzy. Mm-hmm. They're a bit more one-to-one analogy, and also that, like, gives you, that's such a good hook for, it's one of the things I like about Witchlight, it's such a good hook for getting the party together. Yeah. It's such a good hook for, like, we don't pre-know each other, we're not traveling companions, we all meet up at this place, but it's a reason to, like, journey together. Mm-hmm. And then there is, of course, the most obvious reason for anyone to go into the labyrinth, and indeed, the 100% of people we know that have gone into the labyrinth, it's been for this reason, and that is you wish something away. Mm-hmm. Either you individually, PC, or the royal you, like an NPC. That's the obvious, you wish something away, and you're going after it. The problem is, of course, PCs are quite genre-savvy individuals. And I think it would be extremely rare for a PC to just make a casual I wish. Though, if you, like the goblins at the opening, have your ears perked up for that, this would be a fantastic thing this spring. Like, if you're just ready to go, one of your PCs makes a casual wish, and you're like, bam, Labyrinth!
I'm just casting aside all my plans for this session. Labyrinth. We'll get back to Curse of Strahd later.
But you could also have an NPC as wish something away that's important to the PCs.
Yeah. So like that's in the Coronation comic, the baby who's wished away, the mother goes in after the baby, but it's the father who wished the baby away.
Right.
It's a deadbeat dad and he wished away the baby, and so the mother has to go in and save him.
So that's a nice, if you want to be a little different, if you want like a little bit of a twist on it, then that's a nice, like, somebody wishes away something and you want it back, they don't want it back. You're trying to go in and undo the wish.
Yeah. And then when we were sharing this with Azolin, who is a huge Labyrinth fan, he had the suggestion, I'm not sure what we could do with this, but it's great.
But here it is.
Yeah.
For posterity.
Is it like, what if a Dark Lord wished their torment away? Like, if Strahd got so tired of seeing Tatiana all the time, he said he wished Tatiana away? Like, I don't know what would happen there either, but man, it's juicy.
That's good,
It's as juicy as a delicious peach. So, thanks, Azolin. I hope someone runs this.
You also could do a neat, like, the post-Labyrinth thing. So, if you had a Sarah that failed, like an NPC that did do the whole Sarah experience but failed, and there is that, like, question of what if Sarah had failed, would she have sort of been stuck in the labyrinth forever, which is one possibility, or maybe it would have been, like, she's back, and she's living her life, but she never grows up. She never matures. She never kind of becomes an adult and is just sort of a, man-child.
Yeah.
Like,
or woman-child.
Playing with toys and costumes. And just living a life of complete selfish immaturity.
Yeah, and it's because, like, her soul is still in the labyrinth and her body is outside doing this immature life.
So this could be the thing. They investigate NPCs acting strange, a little bit of PC investigative magic. I'm sure there's specific things let you know, like their soul is missing, like with sort of the soul jar spell. And then they kind of can maybe follow the trail of, like, they've maybe got some, like, drawings or some journal entries about the Goblin King, and they, like, talk about having a weird dream about going to the labyrinth. Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, here's what we're doing. And this is nice. You go into the labyrinth, maybe do a double for nothing type thing, and you can kind of have the PC with the strongest relationship to this sort of failed Sarah is sort of the new Sarah. Mm-hmm. And it could maybe even be the Mindscape overlap. Like, a lot of that Mindscape's still there in universe. It's even because Jareth is, draining their soul still. Mm-hmm. And this new one comes in, then you have this kind of neat overlap.
Yeah. It's a lot like if you're listening to a Disney D&D podcast, there's a decent chance you've seen Owl House. And I'm thinking of, they go into this character's mind, and she has this very fraught relationship with this character who's her former best friend. And so it's mostly the Mindscape character's Mindscape, but like all of this kind of inner demons from the best friend is also sort of seeping.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would work great for Labyrinth. And then you could even have, this would be a good way to not just have there be one Sarah, if you wanted to have it to not just spotlight the one PC, because you're going into Van Richten's mind or whatever, and so the overarching flavor is going to be the Van Richten labyrinth, but like little bits of all of your PCs are creeping into this area or that area, and that could be a good way to get around kind of the one person's the main character and everybody else is their amazing friends.
Also, Aslan suggested, you could take this if you didn't want to do the, like, they're acting weird, they're saying you practically knock down the door. They could be, like, in a coma.
Yeah.
And once again, D&D, it's great because, like, couple of low-level divination spells. Like, okay, it's a magical coma. Mm-hmm. Okay, their soul's out of their body somewhere. Okay, we poked around their room and found, like, a chalk drawing of a labyrinth door, like, under the carpet. Bingo, bango.
Bingo, bango, boingo.
Here we are. We're going in a labyrinth. Oh, it's that labyrinth. Wow, the David Bowie one. Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Things just keep getting better.
So, whatever the reason, someone makes a wish, maybe PC, maybe NPC, maybe you're there when the wish happens, maybe you're sort of trying to be the mop-up operation, the cleanup operation, taking care of someone else's failed Sarah wish. But you go into the labyrinth, and then, like, this is the part we talk about the kind of story we see here.
Yeah.
And with the story we are imagining, we don't have much to say here other than stuff we've already said, and indeed the movie suggests.
Yes.
So, it's pretty obvious. You have to solve the labyrinth, right? Like Jareth tells this plot of this adventure in the first 15 minutes of the movie. You have 13 hours, you have to get through the labyrinth, you have to get to the Goblin City, you have to get to the castle. Mm-hmm. You get to the center, you solve the labyrinth, you win in that time. You're moving from environment to environment, overcoming challenges. And some of the challenges will be your classic D&D, overcoming hazards or environments, or crossing stinky swamps, or fighting guards with little bitey guys on their sticks. And they're moving through the labyrinth, because remember, it really is Jareth, because that's what it's really about. It's about solving Jareth.
Yeah. When you're solving the labyrinth, you're learning more about yourself, and as you mentioned, that's, having that kind of, like, self-realization, that growth, that maturity, which is Jareth's kryptonite, and the idea that the center of the labyrinth is intimacy, and, coming closer to Jareth and everything. And so, one possibility, if you don't want to do a whole bunch of encounters that are about the PCs, if that just sounds exhausting, you could have it be that as they're going through the labyrinth, they're learning more about Jareth.
Yeah.
They're finding out about his backstory, they're getting that intimacy, and they can, like, shove that in his face when they get to the center of the labyrinth.
Right, you could have a mechanical effect at the end.
Yeah.
Of they can really throw him off his game, really give him a bunch of negatives, disadvantages, rolling with advantages for social stuff, if they've learned his backstory.
Yeah, finding, like, bits and pieces of the original Sarah and being able to throw her at him, oh man.
Man, that'll be good.
That's gonna be a thing.
And remember, as we said there, the key here is, and this is, I think, very convenient for a dungeon master, because it means you have a lot of reasons to fudge stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not about the objective, like, physics rolls of the dice rolls. Like, Sarah successfully crossing the Bog of Eternal Stench is not about Sarah rolls adequately on her acrobatics check. Mm-hmm. Or her athletics check. It is she doesn't give up.
Yeah.
And as long as your PCs are not giving up, and if you wanted to put in a metric of, like, rolling, like, a wisdom save or something, sure. But as long as they're not giving up, like, it will solve itself. The solution will present itself.
But so when we're talking about this, like, trying to make sure that the PCs don't give up, your players aren't going to give up until they're really frustrated. Like, you don't want to get to that point. So they're going to want a way to represent that mechanically, because that is the game they're playing.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be through loss of hit points, because we don't really see that in Labyrinth.
No,
like, I don't think anybody ever takes hit point damage in Labyrinth, except maybe Ludo when he's getting
the little, like, artillery guy when a rock falls on him. But hey, he's fine.
Yeah. But so some of the ways you might be able to, like, kind of represent that loss of hope, that loss of willpower, is you could have it be that as they're failing, they're taking levels of exhaustion. That could be kind of representing the losing hope, the losing the drive to go on, and then, they rest and they get that exhaustion back. If you want to just do hit points, because that is the mechanic that's written into D&D already, then you could basically say that it's all psychic damage, that it's not like it's actually hurting them, but that this is like their hit points are kind of chipping away their willpower. And you'd have to fudge that a little bit, because why does the barbarian have more willpower than the wizard? But, you can figure something out.
Yeah. General stamina and, you're just that inner strength and ability to go on. And I mean, hit points are abstract anyway. And I know a number of 5e variants have like made explicit the whole, this kind of represents just willpower.
Yeah.
It represents stamina and willpower and just the willingness to go on. And so in terms of that stamina, that loss of energy, that giving up, one possibility is it's just a hit points as an abstraction. Another is using exhaustion.
And then you can have short rests to alleviate the exhaustion and the idea that kind of like gets your spirits back up.
Yes. I've done this in a couple of games where I've tried to make exhaustion a big thing, is I've had it be like, if you take a short rest and spend hit die, you can alleviate the effects of exhaustion for like that many hours. So like if you spend 2 hit dies, then for the next 2 hours, you don't have those negative modifiers. And this is, I think, going to feel more labyrinthy just because you're not getting into that hit points. It's hard to separate that from being stabbed. And you even have a nice, like, if you get to 10 levels of exhaustion, you give up.
You could also have, to kind of going back to some of the older mechanics, they would have ability point damage. And you could have that with, like, wisdom or charisma representing your strength of will or something like that. And if you want to avoid death spiral, then you don't even actually have it be that their saves and stuff go down or their skill checks related to that go down. It's, they're totally fine until they aren't.
It's just like a life bar.
A life bar, yeah.
And this is, I think, good because we mentioned that whole fundamental dilemma of the fiction is you are fine if you don't give up, and PCs aren't going to give up.
No.
Like, if I'm like, you want to give up? Like, but this gives it a metric that's not hit points. This gives it, like, either exhaustion or your, like, wisdom score. And that's like, okay, that's fair play. That's like, I gave up because I got to 10 levels of exhaustion. And that is just a totally fair play kind of deal. Although, once again, exhaustion, some people really like that it's a death spiral, but you want to be careful there. Because death spirals, you have to have exactly the right scenario for that to be fun. So, maybe you don't even want the full negative modifiers of exhaustion that you normally have.
It's
and
just
it's just a life bar. Like with the ability thing, it's just a life bar. So it's Dungeons and Dragons, has to have combat.
Yes.
Like 2/3 of your character sheet, 2/3 of the buttons on the control panel the game gives you are combat. Once again, maybe you're a weird, overly complicated nerd like us, and you're like, I'm totally cool just making a lot of investigation rolls and persuasion rolls, and I'm happy. But most people, like, they're gonna want combat. And there is combat, right?
Yes.
This is not like, Spirited Away. Or Christmas Carol, where we're like...
There's no humongous in Spirited Away,
So there is the scene with Ludo, there is humongous, there's the whole Goblin City battle scene. And so we have some thoughts on how to make this combat evocative of Labyrinth, because regular D&D combat, boy howdy it isn't.
No.
And the first is every combat should have an element of puzzle.
Yes.
It should never be like 12 goblin guards attack, roll initiative, stab each other until somebody's dead. It should be every combat has a trick. And you're giving them tips or having them make rolls, perceptions, persuasions, insights to figure out that trick.
12 goblin guards attack, but they're really cowardly, and if you make a loud noise, they'll run away.
Or like, you notice that their helmets keep kind of shifting and they keep having to move them to not block their eyes. You're like, oh. We mentioned with Atlantis, PCs love this.
Yes.
PCs love this. I just had this happen in... literally 2 Mondays ago in a game I was DMing oh my gosh, the jewel, smash the jewel, and like so proud of themselves for figuring out the glowing jewel was making the monster's eyes glow and it attacked them. This is, I think,
these were middle schoolers. I'm not being condescending by awing at them.
Yes. And I think this is really fun too. Like, it's really a sense of accomplishment to figure out you give them some kind of clue that, like, humongous, it's a giant battle mecha golem, but you mention its helmet seems to be, like, flopping loosely. And they're like, oh, we don't need to, like, stab this thing in the knees till it gets to 0 hit points. We need to knock the helmet off.
Yeah.
Like, the helmet's flopping. It doesn't seem to be secured like the rest of the armor is. Like, that kind of clue.
Yeah.
Or the fieries, even. Or even, like, Dynamis, the whole... It's the talking, right? That's a combat that they could not win that combat through punching. Or being punched.
Yeah.
That's a persuasion. That's okay, what did you say?
Yeah, yeah.
May I have your permission? Well, yes.
Yes.
That's the puzzle there, is if they talk to Dynamis and realize he just needs to give them permission to cross the bridge. So that's one thing to do, having the every combat be a puzzle. The other issue is time. The Labyrinth board game models it very well. That this is one of those, like the game of the Labyrinth, the challenge of the Labyrinth, the price is always time.
Yes.
The resource you're spending is always time. And the fail condition is always loss of time. So like her eating the peach she lost a bunch of time.
Yeah, yeah.
Her going into the oubliette, she lost a bunch of time.
Yeah. Incidentally, the Labyrinth board game, if you don't have kids... then it's only worth it for the cool minis. If you do have kids, it's worth its weight in gold. It's a great family game. It's not a good adult game.
So that's the thing. A lot of these, like, encounters on the surface are very D&D. Like, any of, like, the things that she has to solve a riddle to get through a door. She has to not fall into a bog. She has to dodge a big, giant mechanical cleaners. But that the loss condition isn't really HP, which, like, normally in D&D, that's the loss condition. That's the thing, like, failing, low rolling, making bad decisions. HP or other resources, things like spell slots or stuff like that. But in Labyrinth, it's really time.
Yes.
So a big thing is going to be figuring out sort of a system of time passing. And this is one where you do actually have to kind of sort of track.
Yeah.
You as the DM are writing down how many hours they have left. And there could be clocks around. Like Sarah does run into clocks occasionally. So the PCs can even have a sense of how much time is going by.
Yeah.
And that'll add urgency. So then finally, one other thing to think about in regards to sort of your normal D&D rules and Labyrinth is inspiration.
Yes.
And I think inspiration's a very slept upon mechanic. I think...
You see the moment Sarah gets inspiration.
Yes, you see her do the face.
But that's the way it is.
She stares right in the camera and does a little, it's all just junk.
Yeah.
So this should be a big part of the story. And this is a fantastic mechanical way to represent personal growth, because it's Dungeons and Dragons. If it's not a number on your character sheet, it's not important. It's not important, doesn't really exist.
Yeah, yeah.
And that this is a way to have personal growth mechanized, to have personal growth as a number on your character sheet.
Yeah.
So when you have this overcoming those moments, those flaws, those whatever, having those realizations, saying I need to not take things for granted, I need to ask more questions, then you get inspiration.
Yeah. That also might be a good, again, if you're using the exhaustion mechanic. You get to choose, do you get inspiration or do you remove a level of exhaustion?
Or you could have it as inspiration lets you, like, clear exhaustion.
Yeah, yeah.
If you want to spend it, clear exhaustion. And I think if I would absolutely doing this, I would use inspiration.
Yes.
And this is even good. It could be everybody has their own individual pool, or it could be, I know some games do a group pool. And that's even sort of, you're giving each other strength.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it could be like that. You could also have inspiration as a reward for role-playing flaws.
Yes.
Which is one of sort of the reasons it originally exists. So you have that piece of cake moment.
Yeah.
Your PCs, maybe they will, maybe they won't, say like, yeah, Labyrinth's a piece of cake.
And then Jareth could be all like, well, your mom's a piece of cake.
Your mom's a piece of cake. Because he is a petulant little twerp. So that could be another thing. You could also award inspiration for that.
And then we already talked about what happens when you get to the center of the labyrinth. We don't need to get into that again. You confront Jareth, intimacy's his kryptonite. You have no power over me moment. Boom. But we always have to talk about the fail condition.
Yes.
And we mentioned the soul kind of being in the labyrinth. As a DM, you can choose, are they trapped in the labyrinth forever as goblins? Do they just lose their potential for growth? Do they kind of like black out and then suddenly the Weatherby Foxgroves are there pulling the labyrinth? And
I haven't had a thorough look at the 2024 DMG. I don't know if they have the like long-term madnesses. I suspect they don't. But if you're listening to this, you probably have access to the 2014 DMG.
Yeah.
And that does, and that might be a good way of reflecting like a piece of your heart still in the labyrinth.
Yeah, kind of like what we talked about with Christmas Carol.
Exactly. You get a long-term madness, then even, and it's a D&D mechanical terms, maybe it could be cured with a Greater Restoration spell.
Yeah.
Greater Restoration spell can help you mature.
I mean, then you even have the advantage of only having the one Sarah is that one of the other PCs can go in for a double or nothing. So,
Yeah.
And then, just real quick before we get into our dread possibilities, if Sarah's an NPC, then in order to keep it from being too separate from the PC stuff, then make the lessons that she needs to learn connected with lessons that the PCs need to learn, or make them related to her relationship with the PCs. So you could have it be, like, fixing a relationship that one of the PCs has with this NPC, or, like, we always come back to Van Richten being the person because he's Van Richten, but, like, maybe if his, like, Labyrinth mindscape is about that he just wants to give up and he's tired. Maybe if your PCs are at a low point, then they're kind of seeing their own struggles with wanting to give up the good fight being reflected.
Yeah.
You know?
Or if it's like that he needs to open up to people and trust them and stop shutting people out because he's scared of them being hurt. Like, that could be a thing your PCs have to learn as well.
Yeah.
You could have your brooding loner PC who also needs to learn to trust others.
Yeah. Or maybe, like, the opposite. You have, like, your very open, friendly little ray of sunshine PC who's kind of seeing these things that Van Richten has in his heart and they're really shaking her.
So, we have talked about what kind of very weird high-concept adventure, possibly full of hoggles, that you are going to have in the Labyrinth. Let's talk a bit about some variants of that in our Dread Possibility section. So the first thing we always talk about in our Dread Possibility section is the wide spectrum. This is one of those ones where, like Up, I could actually see this equally for older players or younger players.
Yeah, like, it's going to be more for older players,
Yes.
but we showed it to our kids and they liked it a lot.
Yeah, no, you absolutely, if you're a cool parent with cool kids with good taste, Labyrinth could absolutely be their favorite movie. Or that is inherently like a kid movie.
Yeah.
So, I want to talk about some tips for running it for younger players, for the target demographic of the original movie, and then tips for running it for the more, hardcore current fandom.
People who were originally in the
target demographic, yes. This is obviously a pretty young player friendly thing on the surface, right? Like, this is a couple of tweaks here and there, but like the target audience is like 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
So if maybe you want to go a little younger than that, you might make a few tweaks. We're thinking, obviously the big thing is those undercurrents. The big thing, we talked about how you watch this when you're a kid and you're like, woo, Muppets, yeah, this is awesome, this is so cool. And then you watch as an adult and you can kind of get all the psychological undercurrents and that Jareth is a sad and lonely person.
Yes.
And exactly what Sarah's growing up entails and what it means. So in this case, you can just have Jareth be a jerk that needs to be overcome.
Yes.
Right, you're not digging into the various things, various awakenings.
Or even the possibility that he might be a figment of your imagination, because that, like, never crossed my mind when I was a kid.
Yeah.
We don't have the fluid Jareth for aging down.
Yeah. I also suggest that you kind of lean into more a little bit The Wizard of Oz, that you have a bit more of the direct analogs. If you want to make that parallel, you want to have this be like one of or more of your PCs are the Sarah of this story. Then you don't want just the subtlety of the, like, NPC who has some of the mannerisms of an NPC in their life. You want to have, like, it's their mom in a hat.
Yeah. And I think also, this is live, baby, it's not in our notes. But this is a thing for younger players, or also for, like, if you don't want to run something this crazy and high concept. If you're running a Labyrinth game for younger players and for some adult players, they're going to be real disappointed if you don't have a bunch of the, like, beats that are in the movie.
Yeah.
If you don't have the Bog of Eternal Stench and the Knockers and the Fireys and the this and the that.
Yeah.
So I think, like, having those iconic set pieces, but bringing in a little bit of a spin that relates it to the character would be something that they would find really rewarding and really, like, oh my gosh, it's, like, Labyrinth, but the Fireys look like those crazy Vistani that we ran into. But,
yeah. This is potentially, we had Oops All Hoggle, this might be Oops All Sarahs. This is one of those things where, like, it's a movie, so it has to be this very, like, simple overcoming flaws. And that maybe for adults that might not totally work, but it'll totally work for younger players.
Yes.
With, like, you have this character flaw, you have an encounter, you go, it's all just junk, and you're fixed. Hooray, you're a mature person now.
The way to do Oops All Sarahs that would work with kids, and honestly, this might be a thing to do, again, if you're playing for adults who really love Labyrinth and they all want to be Sarah, which I can understand that. And it would be, like, everybody gets their own zone. Like, there's one zone of the Labyrinth for each PC. that's hitting on that PC's flaw, and they do that and they're done.
Yeah.
So, like, they're going through with the wise man and his hat, and something with the wise man and his hat relates to the wizard's flaw. And they do that and they're done. And the wise man looks like, that annoying wizard that they ran into and the other thing.
Yeah.
And then they go into the oubliette, and the oubliette hits the paladin's flaw, and they do that and they're done. And just doing that is great for kids, and also for, again, if you don't want to do this whole high concept psychological experiment.
Yeah.
If you just want to roll dice,
you just want to roll dice and do a Hoggle impression, or have Sir Didymus running around being ridiculous.
Yes.
So the fundamental adultness of Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
So this is sort of the thing to keep in mind if thinking, how do I do this for younger players? That adultness comes from being an adult, seeing Sarah's internal growth, like her desire for escapism, her immaturity, and that growth in immaturity, and some other things. And just that like looking at that story, which you like watch as a kid, and like, this is fun, this is great. Oh, I hope this pretty girl beats the bad goblin guy and gets her baby back, and this is some exciting stuff. And you need those adult eyes to really pick up what this story means for Sarah as a person.
Yeah.
A good thing there is Inside Out, where you can watch as a kid, here are the emotions, they're having this adventure, Joy's being a jerk, Sadness is doing this, Anger's doing this, and this is having these effects on Riley. Whereas it's those adult eyes, the adult perspective of the story is understanding what this means for Riley as a person, emotionally. Like, oh, this is about her really, really struggling emotionally to process this traumatic thing, and she feels this intense pressure to be cheerful. And the kind of fundamental dissonance and the chaotic effect that's having on her mental health.
Yeah. That, like, kids can get the very simple, it's okay to be sad sometimes, and you need to be sad sometimes. They don't understand fully what's going on in the scene, or she's trying to be joy, but all she has is anger, fear, and disgust.
Yes.
And so when you're doing Aging Down with Labyrinth, if you're doing with adults, then by all means dig into that, all those deeper subtext things. If you're kind of doing the Oops All Sarah's simplified version with adults, do whatever you want. But with kids, you want to make sure you're going in with kind of a light hand, and I would argue even a lighter hand than Labyrinth has. So, like, I know a lot of people found the Fireys really traumatic because they're trying to take off Sarah's head, and I never found the Fireys particularly traumatic because I was like, what, they're going to take off her head and it's the Labyrinth and it's magical, so she's going to get to play basketball with her head and it'll be great. But what scared the bejesus out of me as a kid was the trash lady.
Yep.
Because the trash lady was telling me some things about my stuffed animals that I was not yet ready to hear. And you don't want to give the kids that you're playing with a trash lady.
Yeah, that's Jim Henson's prerogative.
Yeah.
Not yours.
They don't need to confront that now.
I guarantee if you have a table of younger players, they are not ready to process. It's not fair. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It's just a moment that's so easy to miss and overlook in your kid. It doesn't have the hooks of the trash lady. But, like, that's something kids aren't really ready to hear.
Yeah.
But adults watch that and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is such a moment of maturity.
Yeah.
Of, it's not fair. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, with your kids, it has to be much more, they'll just, like, very simple. In this zone, the barbarian has to keep his temper.
Yeah.
And in this zone, the bard has to be brave, even though he's cowardly.
Yes.
And just very simple flaws.
And once again, it's nice with Dungeons & Dragons because, especially if you're using the 2014 character sheet, you got the flaw right there. Yeah, it's written there, and you build off that.
And the kids are going to be playing it very broad, and so you can too.
So that is our advice for if you've got cool kids with cool kid taste and awesome choices of movies at your table. But what about the much, much more probable demographic of you've got some 30-plus adults with Jareth t-shirts, who I'm looking at right now, who's named Rachel, at your table, currently wearing a Jareth t-shirt.
I knew we were recording tonight, so I came prepared.
And you want to talk about a slightly more adult, Jim Henson with the kid gloves off version of this adventure.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to keep this PG-rated, listeners, but we're talking about David Bowie and his pants, magic pants. So I will do my very best, but if I fail, then future Rachel will come in with a skip ahead warning. So One of the things you can do is the labyrinth can be a lot darker and creepier. Other than the trash lady, and for a lot of people, the fiery, so the movie really isn't scary. But you could have a lot more scary stuff where, the Sarah is confronting her inner darkness, seeing the logical extension for her path might lead, like with the trash lady, where she's seeing this dark mirror version of herself. Like, you don't want, as we talk about so often, you don't want dark and edgy labyrinth where the walls are made of skulls. Unless skull imagery plays somewhere into your character's backstory, and, maybe the necromancer is going through and the walls are made of skulls for them. But, like, you don't want it to be a black metal album of labyrinth.
Yeah. Would listen to that album.
I would too.
But I don't necessarily want to play through that at the table.
Yeah. Like, unless you're really, like, flipping the middle finger to your players' expectations, that you don't want there to be this whole thing where, like, everyone is a murderer or whatever, because part of the theme is that love and kindness can win over some of the denizens. Like, again, unless you're deliberately deconstructing that.
Yeah.
But you can have more moments along the lines of when the fairy bites her, and she thinks that fairies do good things like granting wishes, but it bites her. They were coming back to the Coronation comic, there was a moment where there's this sweet little mermaid who is asking Jareth's mother to please help her, and everything, so Jareth's mother goes over to help her, but it turns out that she's a horrible flesh-eating mermaid. Yeah. And, if you have one or two moments like that, as long as it's not the overall tone, it'll still feel like Labyrinth.
Coronation is, I think, a good model.
Yeah.
Because Coronation it's a Labyrinth comic, and they really wanted to feel authentically Labyrinth. But it's a comic, it's not a kid's imprint. It was like just, I think, Boom or Dynamite Studios just doing this for their normal adult comic buying audience.
Yeah.
So even just, they can talk a lot more about killing. They can have a troll who keeps saying he wants to eat them. And like they can get them a little bit like darker and grittier and more adult because it is Labyrinth for an adult audience, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Or even like a big part of the flaw she needs to overcome is realizing that her boyfriend is a trash person.
Yes.
Not like the trash lady. Like Elon Musk.
Yes.
And so having that kind of like more adult path that's like self-actualization rather than growing up can be kind of a thing that you do. And then, I repeat, pants magic pants.
You knew it was coming. As soon as we said you knew this was coming.
When we get into incorporating the older material, I'm going to be talking about a lesser-known Ravenloft Darklord, the Phantom Lover. And and his whole thing was coming to grieving widows, like, looking like their spouse. And you could absolutely have Jareth, like, explicitly granting those wishes of loneliness. Explicitly kind of granting that kind of wish. We get much more Jareth as incubus, which, I'm fanning myself.
I feel like a quick bop around AO3 might give you a couple of thoughts on that.
Tom can confirm I literally started fanning myself. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to have that be the tack that he takes for the Sarah, then you could have there be kind of more debauchery, like especially in stuff like the ballroom.
Yeah.
Like if you have the ballroom be more debauched, then you're honestly like in line with where it was originally. Going full Mask of the Red Death with it, where it as it was, the ballroom was kind of about how adulthood is simultaneously alluring but also scary. That Sarah's very drawn to this, but she's also afraid of it. And that applies to her feelings towards certain adult things also. And if instead of it being about the lure and terror of adulthood in certain things, it's more about the allure and terror of absolute freedom, absolute hedonism, absolute do whatever you want. You could get into some real, like, go watch the Vincent Price Mask of the Red Death and see how that can look. Speaking of the ballroom, by the way, because I don't think we mentioned this yet, I think it was in our outline and it got deleted because this episode is so long.
Yeah,
I don't care. This is so good. In the ballroom, that when they were designing the costumes, a bunch of the outfits are very old and worn, and the lace is tatty, and a lot of the people have broken jewelry. Because they've been in there dancing forever. And the party has never stopped. And that could totally be where some Sarah is. Just in this awful, decadent party that has been going on for, a while. She can't remember exactly how long. But, a while.
Awesome. He fielded a whole sketch about that.
Yeah. So, that kind of thing. Like, even not getting into any of the anything with it. That's already, that already feels
any magical quality.
That already feels aging up.
Yeah. So we always have the aging down for younger players with cool taste. We always have the aging up for nerds that imprinted on this movie like a baby bird hatching when they saw it when they were like 10. We do have one other additional thing we want to add to this episode, which is, I think, a really exciting possibility, especially this is a way to do a Labyrinth-flavored story that incorporates much better into a traditional campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like, I really want to do something with Labyrinth, I love Labyrinth, I have that same purple t-shirt Rachel's wearing right now. But I'm, like, running Curse of Strahd, and I don't want to do a weird, like, dream world. Like, pause my game, go to a dream world, and then go back to my game with a little personal growth.
How do I work Jareth into Curse of Strahd?
And that is the possibility of Jareth as a Warlock patron.
Some of you just sat up really far in your seats.
Possibly fanned yourself. And so the neat thing here is Jareth, it gives you a strong personality. And if you just have that relationship with Sarah as a model, it gives you that really interesting push and pull. That, like, the best Warlock PCs, Warlock patron stories, are going to be the ones where it is that push and pull, where the patron is a person with goals and desires and a relationship, too. We are imagining, Rachel, get ready to fan yourself. We are imagining they have that Sarah one, and the great thing is also, you can get a lot more deeper in that relationship, because if they accept Jareth as a Warlock patron, then, like, that's what they're in here for. They're here to be Sarah.
Yeah.
They're here to be Jennifer Connelly.
Aren't we all?
And so, our metaphysic of Jareth, this is another way he's kind of got that relationship that gives him definition, that push and pull, that conflict. So he's constantly going to try and get them to submit to him, and they're going to be pushing back, and that gives him definition.
Oh man, he's trying to get them to submit, but that's killing the golden goose.
Yeah.
Like, this is an ongoing relationship. This is going to be giving him definition and sustenance for a good long time if he just plays the long game. But I don't know if Jareth can play the long game.
Yeah. Does he have the sort of self-control to play the long game?
Mm-hmm.
So we're imagining you can, stat-wise, you can just use the Archfey patron, because he has very... he's not technically an Archfey in our metaphysic, but he basically is. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those powers, like the Fey Step and the charm abilities, those all fit having Jareth vibes. Mm-hmm. And you're his agent in the outside world, and you're trying to... one of the things he's having you do is spread the story of the Goblin King and the Labyrinth. And so he has that definition. He has people thinking about him and imagining him, and also hoping that people will make wishes. And even maybe try, if you want to be like a jerk warlock, you're trying to spread subtle unhappiness. You're trying to encourage selfishness and self-centeredness. You're giving them crystals that let them see their dreams, but they're not gifts for ordinary girls that take care of screaming babies.
Yeah, even that Jareth has, he's reached the point where he's realized that actually being able to be anything is not great. And so he could just be having you spread the version of himself that he wants.
Yeah.
Like saying, wow, this just went from Changeling to Lost to Mage to the Ascension real fast. Wow, okay.
As so many things do. He's like, I want to be 1986 mullet wig David Bowie, and so I'm just gonna
who doesn't?
Have that be the story. Have that be the version that my warlocks are spreading, so everybody who comes in here gives me 1986 mullet wig David Bowie. So you can, if you're becoming this warlock, you have this goblin ethos of taking things too. This could be like your classic pickpockety type thing. This idea that goblins take what's not cared for or paid attention to. And that's like kind of what the goblins do. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you could either be like taking stuff, or even you're the sort of front man and you're encouraging people to be selfish, encouraging them not to pay attention, encouraging them to make wishes about babies.
And if you're not evil aligned or even, a neutral jerk, then Jareth's trying to get you to do this stuff. That's the constant push and pull and battle of wills and deliciousness that's happening.
He gives you power, but he's pushing you to be a worse person. But it actually kind of helps him if you push back. Like, this is the great thing. He's got those twin contradictory desires that are sort of the heart of the torment, that one part of him does want you to submit and to be bad and be a goblin, but one part of him wants you to push back. And that's what makes you interesting to him, is you push back.
Yeah.
That's what makes you not a goblin, and goblins are boring. Goblins obey him, but they're boring.
I have this in the notes with fans of self in parentheses afterwards. These are like the goals he has on paper as you spreading these stories and stealing things and getting people to make wishes. But ultimately, what he wants is you.
Okay. Fanning self. She's fanning self as we speak.
I am, yes.
So, finally, there could be, for like a more specific thing, especially if you're doing a kind of Kingdom Hearts story and you have a Goblin King, Warlock, and man, you're lucky. Man, you're a lucky person. Then you could actually get a really interesting thing with, of all things, the movie Wish.
Yeah, because we were thinking about like what might be some of his bigger overarching goals. Like, especially if you're bringing in a lot of these Disney domains where wishing is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
That he could have beef with a lot of these Disney
right?
guys because they're making wishes with these people instead of with him.
People are giving Magnifico their wishes, so he can't get them. Like, they can't wish for the Goblin King to come and take the baby away because Magnifico has the glowing sphere of, I wish my kids were gone. I wish the goblins would take my baby away. Or even the fairy godmother is going around granting people's wishes, and she's not asking the Goblin King to get her to the ball. She's the fairy godmother, make her a pumpkin coach.
Yeah, and like with taking like the fairy godmother's wand and having this like gathering up all these other people's little bits of magic and everything, you could do worse than to watch the first couple seasons of Once Upon a Time and model him off of Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah.
Not in his mannerisms, obviously. Because Jareth doesn't
very different.
Deary, but,
very different vibe.
But in terms of his
very
goals and his operations,
yes.
yeah.
Rumpelstiltskin in the first couple seasons of Once Upon a Time actually is a quite solid, if you wanted to have Jareth interacting more with sort of the material plane. If you wanted to have, once again, if you want to incorporate Jareth in the Curse of Strahd.
Yes.
Then, like, that's actually not a bad model for how he would operate, kind of interacting with the human world. So, we've given you our thoughts on doing this game for younger players, for older players, for Jareth-loving Warlock players.
For AO3.
For AO3 players. At long last, after much dangers untold and hardships unnumbered, we are here to give you our parting thoughts in the section we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So the first thing we like to do in our parting thoughts section is to give you the genre of horror, and that is from Vampire Inside to Ravenloft. They give you a bunch of different genres of horror, and they talk about how to like incorporate them into games, aesthetic signifiers, monsters. It is one of the most useful parts of the book.
Yes.
And is great just for any, I think, horror GM to think about, because it will help you focus the horror that you're doing. So some of them are tricky. Like Paradise Falls was a little trickier, and we've had a couple. Atlantis was a little trickier. But this one, I think, is not tricky.
There's for the secondary, there are two that I'm thinking between, but I feel like one of them has the edge. The primary is very obvious.
Yes. So primary, I almost wrote it in the script just now, and then deleted it to not be presumptuous.
I love you.
But I'm about to start typing letters, and I'm typing D-A-R-K.
That's the one.
Fantasy. Yeah, that's how I'm
Dark fantasy.
Dark fantasy. Dark fantasy. That's what we're doing.
He's the Goblin King. They're goblins. It's fantasy. But we're doing the Ravenloft version, so it's dark.
Or even like, it's so much a fairy tale.
Yes.
But it does have that darker psychological edge. So not even like the Ravenloft version where the Labyrinth is made of bones. Is like, no, just Labyrinth, the 1986 movie, could be classified as dark fantasy.
Yeah.
And the second one, my thought would be psychological.
Yeah, I think, the way that we have it, I think psychological too. I do think if you wanted to go more into the, like, some of the possibilities we were talking about with being a little bit lighter on the stuff geared toward the PCs and a little bit heavier on the stuff geared toward unraveling Jareth's backstory, that would be Gothic.
Yes, it would, yes.
And even the whole, the Labyrinth is Jareth.
Yeah.
And
he is the corruptor.
He is absolutely a corruptor. He is such a Byronic Gothic figure. And I think if the Labyrinth were about Jareth rather than about the PC, it would be 100% Gothic.
Yes, 100%, yeah.
But since our default story isn't that, our default story is to have it be reflecting the Sarah rather than Jareth, then I think psychological.
I cannot remember, and I'm assuming you can. Does Sarah have a Phantom of the Opera poster?
She has cats because
poster.
of Jareth's hair, but I don't think she has Phantom of the Opera.
But like she does on the astral plane.
Absolutely.
Like Sarah
100%.
loves the heck out of Phantom of the Opera.
Sarah loves Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, and
Okay, the reason she does not have
Okay.
a Phantom of the Opera poster is because it came out in 1986, so it wasn't out yet, but she totally had tickets.
On the Astroplay, yeah. So, yeah, absolutely 100% agree. If you want this to be a story about Jareth, and you really want to lean into Jareth as the Labyrinth, and it's all that, like you said, this is the most gothic dark fantasy to ever gothic dark fantasy.
Yes.
This is every quality to gothic. Perfect fit. But our default is not that.
Yes.
Our default is much more emphasizing the Labyrinth is also the journey inward, and is a dream from the mind of the Sarah, based on her mind, based on her preconceptions, the images she's bringing in. And that's like, I'm just saying psychology. I'm saying lots of psychological words.
Like, even it's like the Jungian labyrinth of the journeying through yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're even that, for those people, I love movies like this. I love stories like this, where there's this whole, like, she goes through the labyrinth and battles the Goblin King. But there's a read on this where, like, she just never leaves the house. And this is just the symbolic representation of the sort of growth she's having thinking about Toby.
Tom and I have had intense debates about Pan's Labyrinth.
But either way, the fact that possibility exists is psychological.
Yes.
That it's psychological horror. It's the horror of going into your mind and of the mindscape and of things shifting. And even the whole, one of our big loss conditions for the Sarah is a permanent change of psyche.
Like, even just the fact that we had to do so much work to make Jareth makes it clear that Jareth isn't the center of the story. Like, he's the center of the labyrinth, but he's not the center of the story, because otherwise he'd be a lot more defined. And it would totally be one of those, Jareth is the actual main character.
Yeah. So, then we like to talk about, if you are running Curse of Strahd and want to incorporate Labyrinth, is there a way you could connect Labyrinth or take inspiration from some of the older, especially 3rd edition, 2nd edition Ravenloft material, like the one you already mentioned?
There absolutely is. And unusually enough, I like 3rd edition. 3rd edition is the main thing that I've run, but I think this is all going to be 2nd edition stuff, which is weird.
Window cards.
So a big thing, so I mentioned before the possibility of, rather than doing exhaustion, representing the loss of willpower through ability damage. And a great model for that, we had mentioned this before in WandaVision, is Sienna, the theater domain. That in the original version of Sienna, it was like Lamont Cedium Juste was writing these plays, and he convinced you were a character in his plays, and if he got you to believe you were a character in his plays, then your intelligence would drain down to 0, and you would just be stuck there forever, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
So you could really easily just adopt that and have it be whenever the Sarah fails in a challenge against Jareth, then she loses a point from a mental stat of your choice. Like, whichever one's not going to nerf her, don't be a jerk. Like, don't have the bard be hemorrhaging charisma. That's not cool. But, like, have her be losing a mental stat of your choice, and then when she gets down to 0, that's when she's given up and she's just, floating around will-less in the labyrinth. And then, again, controversially, those aha moments heal it and give those points back.
Yeah.
And then when he's feeding on a Sarah that's given up, if you need to know mechanically what's going on, I see you. I validate you.
You are seen. You are
Yes. If you're like, but what does it mean mechanically?
What numbers?
She's in a bubble and he's feeding on her.
What on the character sheet?
It can be the idea that once he's got her trapped in there, he's just like sucking out all of her mental stats and bringing them into himself to give himself definition. Speaking of being trapped in a bubble, we just keep coming back to the Nightmare Lands.
No, it's been so useful for us.
It really has.
All the way back in, I believe, episode 3 was Neverland.
Yes.
And, like, that in canon, in Ravenloft, you can have a weird dream world. That's a domain. It's not all physical lands.
Even like we were talking about in Christmas Carol, if you're the kind of person who needs mechanics for everything, I see you. I validate you.
You are loved. It's a safe space for you.
Yes. And we're going to get into the ridiculous ways the Nightmare Lands did this when we do our book club of Dread, which we will get to when we're not working on a 3-hour-long episode in a month when we already had an April Fool's Day episode come out. But Nightmare Lands actually, it did have, I think, the best mechanics that you can possibly have in D&D for representing this. And, like, you can even see the, like, oh, well, no, the reason that Jareth is limiting the amount of times he comes in contact with Sarah is that when he spends points to activate his dream powers, that gives her points that she can use to get closer to her inner peace number. And if you want that push and pull to be represented mechanically, go look up the Nightmare Lands. It'll hook you up. And then I had mentioned the Phantom Lover. And the Phantom Lover is so weird.
Sure sounds like an 80s song.
Yeah. Okay, so the Phantom Lover is a thing. He was
This is new to me too, guys. We're on a journey of discovery together.
He was in the supplement Darklords, and I feel great sympathy for the writers because they clearly had this really cool idea for a ghost and had to make him a Dark Lord, and that's exactly what we went through with Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
So, he makes a really interesting ghost villain. He's not a Dark Lord.
You are seen, you are loved.
Yes. But the Phantom Lover's whole thing was that he would, glom onto widows. Like, if widows were just so desperate for their husbands, and they're just praying and praying for their husbands to come back, there's a chance the Phantom Lover will hear them. And he'll appear to them looking like their husband. But except that he has a tail, which is one of his feet, is like this weird scaly dragon foot, which is just cool. And he will, not do anything with them that they don't want to do. Like, everything that happens is completely consensual other than the fact that he looks like their husband, so they're kind of, tricking themselves into what's going on. But if it gets to a certain point, if you take my meaning, then he can start draining their life energy incubus style. And then eventually, once they're drained enough, then he takes them out to a cemetery and he leads them to an open grave.
Ooh,
and tells them
good.
they can be together forever if they go into the open grave.
Ooh, that's good.
And it even says that what is happening mechanically here is the Phantom Lover's domain is a tower in the center of a labyrinth.
Ah.
And when they wish strongly enough, then they actually connect to the labyrinth and they overlap for a second. So that's how the Phantom Lover is able to come and be with them without leaving his labyrinth.
You are seen and you are loved.
You are seen, yes.
Desperately trying to make this work in Ravenloft metaphysics. We feel that.
So if you want to do this, highly romantic, sensual Jareth story, you could basically just rip off the Phantom Lover default story lock, stock, and barrel. If you've always liked the Phantom Lover and thought he sounded cool but not wanted to do kind of the default story connected to the Phantom Lover, then you could have this lonely woman get pulled into the labyrinth and you have to go rescue her, rather than, I guess, seeing the Phantom Lover, luring her on and then killing him? I don't know how you would do this with heavily armed transients.
You need to have the heavily armed transients follow the plot of that episode of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes! Oh
with
my God!
Beverly Crusher's... hang on, I need to count out the adjectives on my hand. Scottish, love, ghost, alien.
Mm-hmm. That had previously gotten jiggy with her grandmother.
Yes. Ooh, that's a...
That was an episode.
Google it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. I'm not saying words.
No, it happened. Sub Rosa. And then to finally bring in some 3rd edition, my baby, and some Shadow Fae, my babies, because you knew that I was going to be bringing in Shadow Fae with Labyrinth. Part of why they were Shadow Fae, they had all this, darkness and shadow imagery. And I think we may have mentioned this in a previous episode, but when they took changelings, the way that they would do it was that they would take your shadow.
Ooh.
They had a silver sickle, and they would use it to cut away your shadow, and they would take your shadow back to the Shadow Rift with them, and that shadow would be the changeling, and then the body that was left behind would be a soulless husk. So you could do, if you're doing this idea of saving a Sarah who's trapped in the labyrinth, you find out that this person's acting weirdly or is in a coma, and you find out that it's because they're in the labyrinth with Jareth. That rather than have them not have a soul, you could have it be that they don't have a shadow. And that could be connecting Jareth into the Shadow Fae and also be just a really cool, creepy detail.
And that's your towel.
Yeah.
That's your we need to do some divination magic. Oh, we need to go in the labyrinth. Oh, it's that labyrinth.
Yeah.
Nice.
And even rather than doing divination magic, it can just be as simple as a perception check.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh, he doesn't have a shadow. Oh, hey.
So, the last thing we're going to talk about in our parting thoughts section is the strengths and challenges of running this Labyrinth domain. And we'll start with strengths, which it's great, it's amazing. Labyrinth, as we've mentioned, is a truly great movie. It is an almost perfect blend of the external and internal. It is a great, fantasy quest, Wizard of Oz style adventure story, but is also an amazing maturity and self-discovery. And the Labyrinth as the journey into the heart of the self is just so well executed. I love this, I love Wizard of Oz, controversial opinion, Wizard of Oz is a very good movie. But I prefer this in terms of it's less on the nose. It's very much, we have that opening pan of Sarah's room that is the whole movie. The whole rest of the movie's here. but it's not like her stepmom's a witch.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good model to bring in, to have that kind of internal expressed in the D&D session and not be like, your stepmom's a witch. And I especially think this is going to be really useful if you want to do a Feywild game. Because I think Labyrinth expresses so much of the kind of vibes of fairy tales and the feeling of fairy tales and what they're going for with the Feywild, but in a fundamentally D&D compatible way.
You're solving puzzles.
You're going through a maze, solving puzzles, and fighting goblins. I've described 2/3 of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, I want to have a Feywild session. I want to evoke fairy tales. But like, how do I do that with a level 3 paladin and a ranger and a rogue, and they're rolling initiative and they're rolling perception checks and they're like playing Dungeons and Dragons? And the answer is Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And Jareth is the best.
Oh my gosh, yes.
He's such a great archfey. And so if you can, like, do a decent Jareth impression, which I've hopefully done my best to do, and you can kind of just have Jareth in your head and trying to be, like, presenting Jareth, that gives you so much of what you want in an archfey. That gives you the alienness, the haughtiness, the grandeur, the force of personality, the command, like everything you would want in an archfey, you have in Jareth.
This is the last time we're going to cite Changing the Lost, I promise. But in Changing of the Lost, there's like a power that basically lets you take on the mantle of an archfey temporarily. So like you get that, basically plus 20 boost to charisma. And a Halite who designed our logo at one point was playing a character who had this, and they just wrote on their character sheet to remind them what the power does. I am David
Bowie. Like, spend 2 glamour, roll this, I am David Bowie. And then one final very like that. Those are the sort of the big narrative, thematic character stuff. But one final very like nuts and bolts GM toolkit. The fact that Labyrinth is so random and so modular.
Yes.
It's really easy to just drop parts of it that aren't working. So let's say you have this whole hedge maze about greed puzzle plan, but the party just like is not vibing it, is like not picking it up, is not into it.
Like none of the puzzles are working. They can't figure out what you're doing.
They're not making any connection with greed. They're just kind of, you could tell they're just getting frustrated with this. And then you can just have them fall through a trapdoor in the tunnels. And that's very keeping in Labyrinth.
Yes.
It's a very Labyrinth feeling experience of, we're in the middle of doing this thing in the hedge maze, and then we just fall in the tunnels and fight some goblins. And you're like, let's just roll initiative and fight some goblins.
Like, especially if it's, that they're doing badly and they know they're doing badly and they fall through the trapdoor into the middle of a sticky situation. That's so Labyrinth. Like, you're being punished for doing badly, but it got you out of there.
So just as a pure GM toolkit perspective, having this ever-shifting reality, super helpful. But what about some challenges?
Is this higher concept than Tron?
Yes, it is.
We keep doing domains and saying they're the most high concept domain we're ever going to do, and we keep eating our words, and this...
What could possibly be higher concept than this?
We'll find a way.
Yeah, we'll find a way.
We'll find a way. Yeah, this is so weird. This is so, like, even more than Christmas Carol. We're going to try with the commentary on the D's Journal, but even more than Christmas Carol, we're saying this is a great domain, guys. All you have to do is make the domain.
Yes!
And, like, you can just start with Labyrinth and, like, put in some little, like, shades of your PC stuff. And honestly, we probably should have started with that as the default and done the high concept thing as a dread possibility.
Not how we do things.
That's not who we are.
Go listen to a different podcast.
This is so much homework.
Yeah. Oh boy, homework.
Getting back to Jareth.
Yeah.
He is David Bowie.
Uh-huh.
When they use that power, Halite is David Bowie. You and I are not David Bowie.
Uh-huh.
But you're going to have to play David Bowie.
Yeah.
Like we talked about with Maleficent, like, Jareth is so awesome, but it's a double-edged sword. Like, it gives you so much grandeur, so much, like, your players immediately are going to be like, oh no, it's Jareth!
Or, oh my, it's Jareth. But that's another form of pressure.
Yes, it is. Like, it's really, really intimidating to try to get Jareth right.
Can confirm. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, I had to do my Maleficent impression. Tom has to do his Jareth impression. Yeah, And then, like, only having one Sarah is a big problem. Like, you can't even do oops all Sarahs like we did with Christmas Carol. If you want to have a full Labyrinth feeling, the spotlight has to be on a single NPC or PC. Unless, if you want to do less of the full Labyrinth feeling, do it a little bit shallow, a little bit more fast and loose, and doing the everyone gets one scene where they resolve their one flaw. So either you're going to be getting a true Labyrinth that's spotlighting one person, or you're going to be spotlighting everybody, which means you're going to be spotlighting nobody, and it's not going to feel like a full Labyrinth. So it's a tricky thing either way. And, like, there's no combat at all. Like, you can fight some goblins, but, like, even less than a Christmas Carol. We were trying to figure out, good ways to bring combat into a Christmas Carol. Danny cast Eldritch Blast a couple times in our Christmas Carol write-up. But there's not space for combat here. And a lot of the tools on your PC's toolboxes aren't the tools that Sarah uses. What is the monk going to spend their key points on? What is the barbarian going to rage at? Like, we don't have those answers for you. I'm sorry.
Like, we mentioned some combat scenes, but they're very un-D&D combat.
Yeah.
And, like, not even combat. Like, really, are you going to look at any scene in Labyrinth and say, like, oh, that's that fight scene?
The big battle?
Yeah, the big battle.
The big battle.
But it's mostly them running around.
And, like, Ludo fighting Didymus, but they're both PCs. That's some PvP. So, yeah.
But, yeah, it's not insurmountable, and we did have a whole section about it, but it's a challenge.
Yes, definitely. But overall, guys, it's just like with Tron.
Yeah.
If you want to run Labyrinth, the heart wants what it wants.
Yeah.
And we're trying to give this to your heart.
Like, we cannot make a better pitch for some of you listening right now, probably most of you listening right now, honestly, than the pros are it's Labyrinth.
Yes.
That's it. Like, we can't say anything more than that. The pros are it's Labyrinth.
And it's Jareth.
1986, starring David Bowie as Jareth.
Listeners, it's Labyrinth, it's Jareth, and one of you is going to be his whole world.
It's very ASMR.
That's how I'm feeling right. We should have recorded this when I had the Jessica Rabbit cold.
So, if you decide to run Labyrinth, if you decide that is indeed enough of a pro that it overcomes every con and beyond, if you figured out a really interesting story with a Dark Lord wishing away their torment, how could they contact and tell us about that?
Please do. Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Tumblr, or Patreon at Wonderful World of Darklords. On YouTube, we're just Wonderful World of Darklord, and our comment section there is very hopping, so check it out.
This is normally the part where I segue into promoting our other works, but first, we have kind of two announcements. And the first is, if you look in the show notes, you will see a link for our Listener's Choice poll.
Yes.
This is our Discord. Through discussion, debate, voting, and all the instruments of democracy, have selected 4 nominees. And those nominees are now in a general poll that everyone can vote on. And the one that gets the highest vote at the end of the month, so we're closing this end of April, will be our November episode.
Yes.
So you don't need to subscribe, don't need Discord, don't need anything.
Yeah.
You can just click on the link and vote on what you want us to do for November.
Yeah, this poll is open to everyone, not just patrons. Check it out. You may also remember back in February, we had our fundraiser for Clinic, the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. And we said if we got up to $250, then we were going to do an extra Listener's Choice episode. And we did meet our goal.
We are proud and happy to announce that there's going to be 2 Listener's Choice episodes.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
It's really easy to feel helpless right now. And guys, we're doing something. Like, if you donated to this, or if you donated to a charity on your own time that wasn't this, you did something. Give yourselves a pat on the back and a hug, because, wow.
If I do say so myself, I think we're pretty good at this dumb, silly little nonsense. And if we can take that talent for dumb, silly little nonsense and bring some good in a bad time, and you let us do that, and that's a very good feeling.
Thank you so much, yeah. And so we had mentioned that there were going to be 2 Listener's Choice polls if that happened, but we're going to be waiting a little bit to do the donor Listener's Choice because we want to give our donors the chance to get a second vote in or to give a 1-up potion to their choice if it didn't make it. So if you're a donor and you're really, really, really rooting for one of the 4 that's up there, and it's not the thing that makes it, you can put it back in.
You can put it back in there with contention. So, it's like a wild card.
Yes. And so next month is going to be the second round of listeners' choice voting for donors.
So look for that in May.
Yes. Also, real quick, speaking of May, as a reminder, last year with WandaVision, we started the tradition of doing Marvel May. And we're doing it again. So once you do it twice, it officially becomes a tradition.
It's a tradition.
So if you listen to the little teaser about where D is going next, and you're like, that doesn't sound like an animated Disney movie. Where is that? It's a Marvel movie.
Bob Iger is, thanks to him, it's covered.
Yes.
And also, we mentioned this has been a very busy prep time for us because we were prepping our April Fool's Phineas and Ferb, which I hope you enjoyed. We were prepping Labyrinth, which was a real job of work, trying to make this very un-Ravenloft thing work in the metaphysics of Ravenloft.
Thank you for doing this for me, honey. Thank you for letting me just...
This is...
pant over Jareth.
You let me pant over the light cycle. So.
I love you.
But we actually have a third April project. And that is Ginny D and Pointy Hat doing their Monster Week at the end of April. And it is Dragon Week this year. And we are going to be participating because if you're listening to this, there's a decent chance you found us through our participation in Kraken Week last summer. Hello, good job. Appreciate it. And so we are not doing a full original. We are going to be kind of doing a section about Maleficent because Disney plus Dragon equals Maleficent. But for those people who have already heard our Sleeping Beauty episode, and good job for you, we are going to be adding some stuff. There's some new content. We're going to do an excerpt from the, episode 4 or 5. 4. Yeah. Sleeping Beauty, talking about our idea about Maleficent as a Dark Lord. But then, and this is kind of really exciting for us, we get to revisit Maleficent and say, what, new thoughts have we had in the, 2 years plus since we recorded that episode?
Yeah, it's been 2.5 years since we did Maleficent. Yeah.
So there will be something, even if you've already heard that episode, there will be something worth listening to. So go do that and get our numbers up for Dragon Week.
Preview, little sneak peek, we're going to be talking about what to do if you want Maleficent to be the big bad of your entire campaign. So, join us for that.
If you like how we have adapted Labyrinth, then there is also some horror movies I've adapted on DM's Guild, some other movies, a couple Disney Tron. We keep bringing up Tron. I did a Tron adventure.
You did, yes.
So deep is my love.
I playtested it twice. It was really fun.
even though...
even though my love for Tron is
not as deep and abiding.
But I got, one of them was with Halite, and I got to see their love for Tron and your love for Tron, and I got to, bask in that light, so that was nice.
So just go on the free write-up for Labyrinth on DM's Guild if you look more by this author, or you follow the link there. Search for Tom Kohler on DM's Guild, you can find those things. And if you like our thoughts on running it for younger players, we do also on DM's Guild have a couple of resources for running more spooky or horror-themed games for younger players.
And then speaking of young people, I have a picture book, Mother Ghost, Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters. It's exactly what it sounds like. I also have a couple of short stories for adults that are available on my website, www.rachelkohler.com. I feel like 99-cent Dreams is...
That is appropriate.
Yes, about, making an unwise wish with a fairy. So, yeah.
Very relevant. Until next time, thank you for listening, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. Please, Yensid, do not lecture me on the foolishness of my wish. Should you ever have the misfortune of smelling the Bog of Eternal Stench, you will agree that I have received punishment enough. Nothing has triggered my wild magic as of yet, but I can feel in my bones that it is here. Despite the troubles it caused me in Paradise Falls, I no longer wish to be rid of it. It is mine, and mine only. There is something to be said for that. Holding a dagger as a mist talisman, I prepared for the next leg of my journey, but I hesitated for one final moment, listening to the last echoes of the owl's cry on the cliffs. I could have stayed, I know. I could have lived in a pretty dollhouse built of my own dreams. But what would it cost? Everything. Regards, D.
I will not chastise you, Danielle. Even a tyrant such as I have spoken the deepest desires of my heart aloud. much to my own regret. Such desperation is what sets us apart from entities such as Jareth, who cannot comprehend the tenacious dreams of another. He expects capitulation, and any resistance befuddles and frustrates him. He is nothing more than a child, wielding the power of a king of the land of empty desires. You have done well to take back what was stolen from you. Many others have failed in their endeavors to solve the Goblin King's Labyrinth. Jareth should have recognized the foolishness in attempting to play his games against my little, obstinate servant. But perhaps I give him too much credit. After all, he is not entirely his own creature, and he shall never allow himself to be. I shall respect your decision to maintain the wild magic infection you develop after the events in San Francisco, and will monitor your progress. The effects upon your person may provide valuable data on the use of such unstable magic. And of course, should you need me, I will extract it with ease.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at DarklordAslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening. I found myself standing once again atop Paradise Falls, my book of shadows at my feet, and the mournful cries of an owl in my ears.
Boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom.